Sorry about that. My internet decided to act up. All right, are we ready to continue? Okay. All right. Good afternoon and welcome to this online hearing of the Committee of Adjustment for the City of Ottawa. The Committee of Adjustment is a quasi-judicial tribunal appointed by City Council to make decisions on certain types of applications under the Planning Act. My name's John Blatherwick, and I'll be chairing this hearing today. And with me are my fellow panel members, Heather McLean, Michael Wildman, and Bonnie Oakes Charon. Please take note that this video conference is being live streamed on YouTube. The video will be archived along with today's agenda on the city's website. Before we begin, we have a few items to outline for your information. While the issues surrounding development in the city are broad, our mandate is quite limited. The committee cannot consider aspects of the proposal that are not related to the required variances, noise, pollution, property maintenance, property values, prosecution for illegal construction, personal comments regarding neighbors, agents, or applicants, additional variances without proper public notice. If there is an identified need for an additional variance or variances, including an increase in the extent of the relief required, a recirculation of the application is required. As part of the statutory public notification requirements, each applicant was required to post a sign on the property and file a statutory declaration confirming the sign posting. We are going to have to read the oath to all the applicants' agents as we proceed through the agendas because we haven't met that requirement. Regarding quorum, if this is lost during the hearing, due to technical difficulties, the proceedings will be paused to allow time for the resolution of the issue. Failing the ability to reinstate quorum, hearing of the items remaining will resume at the outset of the next regularly scheduled meeting of the committee. In terms of the hearing process, listed on the agenda and appearing on the screen are the applications we will hear today. For the sake of efficiency, the committee may deal with agenda items in a different order. Note that the committee members have reviewed the application materials prior to this hearing and any written submissions received in support or in opposition. In addition, the committee will hear today oral submissions from any interested parties as part of our proceedings. The committee may ask for a brief presentation by the applicant, followed by questions from the members where clarification may be needed. The public submissions portion of the hearing will then begin, and any interested parties will be invited to make their submissions to the committee. Panel members may then ask follow-up questions where additional clarification may be required. When you are called upon to provide your comments, we will ask you to do the following. Start with stating your name and municipal address. For the record, we may ask you to spell your name. Then begin your submission by addressing your comments to the panel members. You may ask questions, but please direct them only to the chair. Please limit your comments to a maximum of 5 minutes. Any exceptions will be at the committee's discretion. Once all interested parties have had an opportunity to address the panel, the public submissions portion of the hearing will then be closed. The committee will then make an oral decision to either grant or deny the application. The committee may also choose to reserve its decision. In such case, the panel will deliberate further on the evidence presented immediately following adjournment of the public hearing. In either case, the committee will send within 10 days of its decision, and to all the parties and those who have requested it, a written notice of decision that sets out the reasons for the decision. Decisions of the Committee of Adjustment may be appealed to the Ontario Land Tribunal for a fee within 20 days of the date of the written decision. Only the applicant, the City of Ottawa, the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing, and other public bodies that have an interest in the matter may appeal a decision. Public utilities may also appeal a decision. Individuals or a community association cannot appeal a decision. Now, before we get onto the agenda, are there any declarations of interest from any of the members for this panel or panel 2 or panel 3 items? Okay, seeing none. We have 2 sets of minutes to confirm the minutes from November the 1st and November the 16th, 2022. In the matter of November the 1st, 2022, any amendments, additions, objections to those minutes? All in favor of adopting the minutes as presented? Adoption of the November the 1st meeting minutes have been adopted. Regarding November the 16th, 2022, same questions. Any amendments, objections, additions needed? No. All in favor of adopting the minutes from November the 16th, 2022? All right, those are adopted. Thank you very much. We will now move to the adjournment requests for this session of the panel. And there were two adjournment requests that we have been presented with. And the first adjournment request was for items 1 and 2 on the agenda. And these are for 524 MacLaren Street. The adjournment request was filed by a resident at this property regarding parking issues, I assume. Unfortunately, we cannot deal with these kinds of requests. This is a landlord and tenant issue, which is not within the purview of the Committee of Adjustment. So this item will not be adjourned, and we will deal with this item in the normal order of business today. The other item that's before us for adjournment is item number 6, and this is 927 Wellington Street West. And that adjournment request has come from the applicant's agent. Mr. Thompson is the agent. Novatech, is he there?
Here, Mr. Chair.
All right, to the adjournment request, Mr. Thompson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. The adjournment request is to give us an opportunity to address the city's comments as well as comments from a residents. And in looking at the city's comments, we'd like to seek a legal opinion on this matter as well. That will give us time to do that. So we're requesting the adjournment be sine die at this point.
Okay. All right. Any questions, comments from the panel regarding this adjournment request? All right. All in favor of granting the adjournment as requested as a sine die? Okay. We will see you next year.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're very welcome. So we'll now move on to the regular agenda. And we'll begin with items 1 and 2. And this is an application 524 MacLaren Street to subdivide the property into 3 lots for the construction of 2 3-story 6-unit apartment buildings. The existing detached dwellings will remain on the 3rd parcel, with 1 parcel having a reduced lot width and a reduced lot areas for all the parcels. These are lot width and area variances. The agent for this application, I believe, is Novatech again.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. It's Murray Chown speaking. Simran Soor will make a presentation with respect to the severance and minor variance applications that are before you this afternoon. I just wanted to advise the committee that we've had further communications with planning staff on these applications, and I believe that we have addressed their concerns with respect to the viability of these proposed lots, but obviously they can speak for themselves. But with that introduction, Ms. Soor will be pleased to make a presentation on the applications.
Just out of curiosity, Mr. Chown, I note that the planning department had a request in. Are you fellows or you folks to provide a planning rationale to the department? Has that been met?
So what we have provided to them and copied the committee is a site plan and some very preliminary floor plans demonstrating the viability of developing the proposed severed lots. We haven't gone to the lengths of preparing a planning rationale. I don't think that's necessary under the circumstances.
And you're aware of the Transportation Engineering Services comments regarding driveways?
And there's one existing driveway. We will, depending upon how the site develops, we may retain that one driveway, but there is no intention to increase the number of driveways on Lion.
So their concerns can be dealt with.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. Mr. Oh, I should ask, just out of curiosity here, Slinker, you're the department's position at this time on this application.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Staff have received the applicant's concept plan, which demonstrates the buildable area on each lot for the 2 low-rise apartment buildings, and confirmation from the architects that the low-rise apartments are viable within the proposed lot's developable area. Okay. And as you noted, staff requested additional information to confirm that the potential development can comply with all other provisions of the zoning bylaw. And we did receive that and did not have enough time to complete a complete review prior to the hearing. So staff's some concerns position remains. However, staff acknowledged that this additional information was received. And from a brief review, staff anticipate that there will be no compliance issues, which would address our concerns.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, Mr. Sewer. Very briefly, please, to the application.
Mr. Chair.
Oh, that's right. I keep forgetting the oath or solemn declaration.
Thank you.
This is the last time I'll forget doing this year. You're going to take this, Mr. Chown or Mr. Sewer?
I can take it, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Mr. Okay. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the notice provided to you as part of the application process and by the committee was posted at the property to which the application applies for the prescribed number of days before the hearing and clearly visible and legible during the entirety of that time?
I swear.
Okay. All right. Please proceed.
So good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. My name is Simran Soor, and I'll be presenting the severance and minor variance applications for the property municipally known as 524 MacLaren Street. Next slide, please. The subject property is located in the Centertown neighborhood within the City of Ottawa's Somerset ward. The subject property is located on the southern side of MacLaren Street, and you can see the property on the image in front of you, including its proximity to Dundonald Park and Somerset Street. Next slide, please. The subject property is a corner lot located at the southwest corner of MacLaren Street and Lyon Street. The subject property has a lot frontage of approximately 17 meters along MacLaren Street, a frontage of approximately 33 meters along Lyon Street, and a lot area of approximately 576 square meters. And the subject property is currently occupied by a 2-story detached dwelling. Next slide, please. So the proposal seeks to sever the western and southern portions of the existing lot. The existing 2-story detached dwelling on part 2 will be retained. The 3-story apartment buildings will potentially be built on part 1 and part 3. And you can see all 3 parts in the draft reference plan in front of you. Next slide, please. The image in front of you shows severance application 1. This application will create the western lot labeled as part 1 on the draft reference plan, and part 1 will have a frontage of 9 meters on MacLaren Street and a lot area of 200.7 square meters. Next slide, please. The image in front of you shows severance application 2. This application will create the eastern lot labeled as part 2 on the draft reference plan. Part 2 will have a frontage of 8.3 meters along MacLaren Street, a frontage of 22.3 meters along Lyon Street, and a lot area of 185.2 square meters. Next slide, please. The image in front of you shows severance application 3. This application will create the southern lot, labeled as part 3 on the draft reference plan. Part 3 will have a frontage of 11 meters along Lyon Street and a lot area of 190.4 square meters. Next slide, please. So we'll now speak quickly to the rationale for the severances. So with respect to section 53.1 of the Planning Act, a plan of subdivision is not required for the proper and orderly development of the municipality. And then with respect to section 5124 of the Planning Act, the proposed development has regard for various matters of provincial interest, including the orderly development of safe and healthy communities. The severance of the lot is not premature since the subject property is located within a fully developed neighborhood. The subject property is designated minor corridor in the downtown core transect and is within the evolving neighborhoods overlay. And the proposed development supports intensification and infill development that fills gaps in the streetscape while also meeting the city's 15-minute neighborhood objectives. The proposed severance will also result in the creation of 3 regularly shaped lots. And despite the variances for lot width and lot area, the lot dimensions will be adequate to support future development, including a fully compliant low-rise apartment. And there's also adequate municipal services available on the property, and there are a number of schools located in proximity to the subject property. So the proposed severances meet the criteria of Section 5124 of the Planning Act. Finally, the proposed severances align with the provincial policy statement by providing intensification within the urban area. So it's our opinion that the severances meet all criteria under the Planning Act for severances. Next slide, please. So this slide highlights the requested variances, so we'll speak quickly to the rationale. So the first test for minor variance is that the general intent and purpose of the official plan is maintained. So the subject property is designated minor corridor in the downtown core transect of the official plan, and the requested variances would allow for intensification on the subject property by providing additional dwelling units to the area. The proposed severances will also allow the subject property to be better utilized and for gaps in the streetscape to be filled, and will contribute to 15-minute neighborhood objectives. Next slide, please. The second test for minor variance is that the general intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw is maintained. So the subject property is zoned R4UD exception 733 in the City of Ottawa zoning bylaw. So the requested variance is required for the proposed severance, and the intent of the lot width and lot area provisions is to maintain a consistent lot fabric and streetscape. So the figure in front of you illustrates the lot fabric of the area. The neighborhood is characterized by smaller lots that support a range of different housing forms and densities. The properties outlined in blue all have smaller lot widths than what is proposed, and despite having a lot width that's below the zoning bylaw requirements, the newly severed lots will fit in well with the existing neighborhood. Next slide, please. The intent of lot area provisions is also to ensure that lot sizes are adequate to support development. So the figure in front of you shows the setbacks and developable area of the proposed lots. Part 1 will have a developable area of 89.18 square meters, and Part 3 will have a developable area of 92.03 square meters. So this is adequate space to support a number of different residential uses, including a detached dwelling, duplex dwelling, 3-unit dwelling, and even a low-rise apartment, all of which are permitted uses in this zone. Next slide, please. If you please, pleases you, Mr. Chair, may I have a few more minutes just to wrap up the 4 tests?
Yep.
Okay, thanks. So the third test for minor variances is that the minor variance is considered desirable for the use of land. So the proposed variance is considered desirable for the use of land, as it'll allow for infill development that supports intensification within the urban area while having regard for the existing uses, lot and built the neighborhood. The proposed development better utilizes the subject property and fills in gaps in the streetscape. The proposed lot will also be able to appropriately accommodate future development. So the slide in front of you shows the permitted uses in the R4 zone, which includes detached dwellings, duplexes, 3-unit dwellings, and low-rise apartments. So the proposed lots will be able to adequately accommodate any of these uses without the need for additional variances. Finally, the fourth test for minor variance is that the variances are considered minor in nature. So the proposed variance for lot width is minor in nature, as it constitutes a reduction in the lot width by only 1 meter. This difference is not noticeable from the street, but would allow for the proposed lots to have relatively even sizes and lot widths. The reduced lot width on Part 1 will also allow for the existing building that's retained on Part 2 to be retained with a fully compliant side yard setback. This will provide increased separation between the retained building and a potential development on Part 1. The proposed variance for lot area is also minor because the proposed lot areas will strike a balance between creating evenly sized lots and ensuring that the lots will be able to comfortably fit the retained building and any future development. As was mentioned earlier, the developable area on Part 1 and 3 is 89.18 square meters and 92.03 square meters. So this is adequate space to support a detached dwelling, duplex dwelling, 3-unit dwelling, or even a low-rise apartment that's fully compliant with the required setbacks, soft landscaping, and bicycle parking provisions. So we believe the variance is minor in nature. Next slide, please. So in conclusion, the variances maintain the general intent and purpose of the official plan, the zoning bylaw, and are considered desirable for the use of land and are minor in nature. So it's our opinion that the proposed development meets all 4 tests of the Planning Act and represents good land use planning. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You're aware of the conditions, and I'll just read them out. Right-of-way encroachment agreements, cash in lieu of parkland, existing detached garage demolished under authority of the building permits. Limiting
Yeah, we're-
distance requirements and independent services be provided, grading and drainage plan. Accessory structure demolished and or relocated. Structure straddling the proposed severance line has been demolished, I'm assuming. Road widening or will be demolished, sorry, a road widening provision as well, and a noise attenuation study. So there are 10 conditions requested by the department.
Yeah, we're aware of these conditions,
Okay.
Mr. Chair.
All right, any questions, comments from the members of the panel? Ms. McLean.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple of questions. Can you show us any lots within the circulation area that has similar densities? Lots of the size you're proposing that have similar densities? I notice across the street on Lyon that there seems to be some lots divided, but I don't know what the density is on those and what their size is.
Mr. Chair, I don't think we have that information.
I think it's helpful when we're dealing with lot areas to know what sizes are are in the area. The other question is, would you know, Mr. Chandler or planning staff, what the minimum requirement in the bylaw is for an apartment building in any zone?
Sorry, minimum requirement in terms of,
For an apartment building.
well, what the lowest lot area or lot width that's permitted in?
Yeah, in
anywhere in the
particular in the lot
bylaw?
area, yes, yeah.
I will defer to city staff. I don't have that information at my fingertips.
Through you, Mr. Chair, if I understand the question correctly, for a low-rise apartment with a maximum of 8 units in the R4UD zone, the minimum lot width is 10 meters and the minimum lot area is 300 square meters.
Is the lot area smaller in any of the other zones? Do you know offhand? Is 300
Offhand.
square meters the minimum?
Offhand, I don't believe that I can answer that. However, I can look into that right away.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Thank you.
Anything else, Mr. McLean? Okay. We have one speaker on the list, and Naomi Da Silva at 543 Gilmore Street. Is she there?
Hi there. This is my first meeting, and I've owned 543 Gilmore for just a year, so I just wanted to register to speak if required, but a lot of my concerns have already been addressed by Ms. Moore. So yeah, I think the main issue for me is basically the concerns about drainage. I think the other residents in the neighboring properties have also voiced the same sort of concerns, and so I'm glad to hear that there's going to be a drainage plan. In general, I think we all object to the severance of the lot purely because this would be reducing family housing and housing with urban green space. So it doesn't really keep with the spirit of that block and the neighborhood, in addition to the drainage concerns. And so those are my comments, and I hope they'll help you make your decision.
Thanks very much for your information. The drainage and grading plan will have to be approved before a building permit is issued. So, and quite frankly, if you talk to the applicant, you probably get yourself a copy of the drainage and grading plan that they're going to provide. They're not secret documents.
Great, thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Okay, any other questions, comments from the members regarding this application? All right, and so to the application 524 MacLaren Street, all in favor of approving the application as presented? Right. Your application is unanimously granted. Good luck with your project.
Thank you,
Thank
Mr.
you
Chair.
very much.
You're very welcome. Next applications on the agenda or items 3 and 4. And this is for a property at 9 Gwynne Avenue and 7 Gwynne Avenue. And the applications are to permit a reduced lot area for construction of a semi-detached dwelling. There was an increased building height at one point, but this has been deleted. Variance B, which was for the height to, I believe it was 10.5 meters. Height of 10.5 meters, whereas the bylaw permitted a maximum height of 10 is deleted. So we're left with variance A to permit a reduced lot area of 124.53, whereas the bylaw requires a minimum lot area of 180 square meters. And the agent for this is Mr. Lipke. Is he there?
Hi. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, your address for the record, please.
My home address is 233 Stewart Street in Ottawa.
Okay. All right. We have one question regarding the, I guess, regarding the 2015 decisions of the committee. You're aware that consents and minor variances were already granted for this property. And there's a
Yes.
question whether or not your application needs to be amended, or you're just going to leave it the way it is.
I'm just.
Chair?
Oh, sorry, I have to. The oath or declaration, do you solemnly swear or affirm that the notice provided to you as part of the application process and by the committee was posted at the property to which the application applies for the prescribed number of days before the hearing and clearly visible and legible during the entirety of that time?
Yes, I do.
So you're just going to leave the requests as is, which is fine.
Yes.
Okay. So very briefly, Mr. Litke, your request.
The request is, as you stated, it was previously approved in 2015, but we're requesting a reduction in minimum lot area for this project to proceed, and that's the only item that's on our request list.
And you've revised your plans for the property?
Yeah, after dealing with people at the planning department for the streetscape analysis, we made the decision to remove the originally designed driveway and garage. So it's basically it's a semi-detached, and we removed the garage and the driveway, and we also reduced the original required extended height, and we're keeping it right at 10 meters, which is allowable. So we're just requesting the reduction in minimum lot area.
Okay. And Mr. Van Wyck from the planning department, the planning department's position on this application now, or Ms. Linker?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. The applicant has revised the application to remove the variance to increase the building height and has revised the plans to remove the driveway and garage. Staff have no concerns with the variance for lot area and believe that this was already granted in the past to accommodate a previous semi-detached dwelling proposal. The lot is already created and staff believe that this would be an appropriate use for the land.
Okay, thank you. And we note that that your neighbor at 6 Gwynne Avenue also had concerns, but I guess you have been in correspondence with her.
Yes.
Okay, and her concerns have been met.
I believe so. Yes.
Okay. Any questions or comments from the members of the committee regarding this application? So as regarding 9 Gwynne and 7 Gwynne Avenue, permitted a reduced lot area for construction of a semi-detached dwelling. All in favor of the application as amended? Your application's approved. Good luck with your project.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Next application on the agenda today is application of 49 Mason Terrace. Permit a front-facing attached garage for a proposed 2-story attached dwelling. And Ms. Soar again is the agent for the applicant. And we'll do this right, and I'll get you to do the solemn oath or declaration before I get interrupted. You solemnly swear or affirm that the notice provided to you as part of the application process and by the committee was posted at the property to which the application applies for the prescribed number of days before the hearing and clearly visible and legible during the entirety of that time.
I swear.
Okay. Very briefly, Ms. Soar.
So good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. My name is Simran Soor, and I'll be presenting the minor variance application for the property municipally known as 49 Mason Terrace. Next slide, please. The subject property is located in the Old Ottawa East neighborhood within the City of Ottawa's Capital Ward, and you can see the property on the image in front of you. Next slide, please. Subject property is an interior lot located on the northern side of Mason Terrace. The subject property has a lot frontage of approximately 12 meters along Mason Terrace and a lot area of approximately 337 square meters, and is currently occupied by a single-story detached dwelling. Next slide, please. The proposal seeks to redevelop the subject property with a two-story detached dwelling with a front-facing attached garage. So the slide in front of you shows the proposed site plan on the left and the proposed elevations on the right. Next slide, please. The slide in front of you highlights the requested variances. So variances are required to permit a front-facing attached garage where this is not in the dominant character. The requested variances are functionally the same, but the zoning bylaw repeats the requirement for garages to comply with the SCA in both sections 139 and 140 of the bylaw. So we've applied for 2 variances in an abundance of caution.
Yeah.
So for the first test for minor variances, that the general intent and purpose of the official plan is met. So the subject property is designated neighborhood in the inner urban transect. The requested minor variances meet the intent of the official plan by providing a family-friendly dwelling unit in the neighborhood. The proposal will provide additional living space for the current owners while providing space for parking and storage that is hidden from the street. Additionally, the proposal meets the intent of the Old Ottawa East secondary plan, including policies directing garages to be located to the side of homes and to not project forward or otherwise dominate the building facade. So the proposed garage is relegated to the side of the home and recedes into the house rather than projecting forward. The home has also been designed to emphasize the front entrance rather than the garage, with elements such as the front porch highlighting the entrance. Next slide, please. So the second test for a minor variance is that the general intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw is maintained. So the subject property is zoned R1TT exception 2241 under the zoning bylaw. The dominant character according to the streetscape character analysis is ABA, with the 2 properties identified as having front-facing attached garages indicated with a star in the figure in front of you. The intent of the streetscape character analysis is to ensure new development remains consistent and is compatible with the existing neighborhood context. So despite not aligning with the results of the SCA, the proposed garage will remain consistent with the neighborhood context. So the figure in front of you shows 27 properties in the neighborhood with front-facing attached garages, a number of which are double garages. Many of these properties also have lot widths that are similar to the subject property. This shows that there is precedent for attached garages in the neighborhood. Therefore, despite the results of the SCA, a detached home with a front-facing attached garage would not be entirely out of character. Next slide, please. The proposed development also meets the intent of the streetscape character analysis to ensure that garages do not dominate the front facade of the building and that new development does not adversely impact the streetscape. The image in front of you shows a rendering of the proposed detached dwelling. The attached garage has been stepped back from the street to reduce its visual impact. Additionally, a number of design elements such as a front porch, canopy, and abundant landscaping will enhance the front entrance of the building while drawing attention away from the attached garage. The proposed front-facing attached garage will also enhance the streetscape by minimizing the visual impact of vehicles parked in the side yard. The garage will provide an enclosed space to store vehicles, garbage and recycling containers, bicycles, and other household items such as lawnmowers and snow shovels. This minimizes the amount of clutter that is visible from the street. Next slide, please. So the image in front of you shows the cantilever option that is permitted as of right. This option is not as desirable as the proposed garage option. With this option, vehicles and other items such as garbage bins and bicycles would be visible from the street, and the parked car would dominate the facade of the building rather than the front entrance. Next slide, please. So this image shows you another example of the as of right cantilever option. This option is asymmetrical and it doesn't fit into the streetscape or the character of the neighborhood, with no similar examples in this neighborhood. Despite requiring relief from the zoning bylaw, the proposed development with a front-facing attached garage actually meets the intent of the zoning bylaw and streetscape character analysis, whereas the cantilever option that's permitted as of right does not. Next slide, please. The third test for minor variance is that the minor variance is considered desirable for the use of land. So the proposed variance is considered desirable for the use of land as it'll provide more living and storage space for the current owners and their family while remaining in character with the neighborhood. The two-story built form fits in better with the neighboring dwellings and the existing one-story home, and a number of design elements have been incorporated to maintain the character of the neighborhood, including the front porch and canopy above the front entrance and the change in materials on the second story. The proposed attached garage will accommodate the needs of the current owners and their family by providing space to store a vehicle, garbage and recycling containers, bicycles, and other household items. The fourth test for minor variance is that the variance is considered minor in nature. So as was mentioned earlier in the presentation, there are 27 properties in proximity to the subject property that have front-facing attached garages. The proposed garage would fit into the character of the neighborhood. The garage has also been designed to minimize its visual impact from the street, as I mentioned, and it's tucked into the building, uses similar colors and materials. And the front porch canopy and landscaping elements also highlight the principal entrance rather than the garage. Next slide, please. So the slide in front of you shows the consultation that was undertaken by the property owners. So flyers were outlining the proposed development, and the requested variances were distributed to 45 houses, including all the properties within a 60-meter radius from the subject property. The property owners also reached out to chat with a number of their neighbors about the design both before and after the application was filed. And 5 neighbors, including the immediate neighbors to the east, the west, rear, and across the street, have all written letters of support to the Committee of Adjustment, and 3 neighbors have also expressed verbal support. So the immediate neighbors that would actually be most greatly impacted by the proposed development have no issues with the application, and they believe that it fits into the character of their neighborhood. Therefore, the variances are considered minor. Next slide, please. So just in conclusion, the proposed development maintains the general intent and purpose of the official plan and the zoning bylaw, and it's desirable for the use of land and minor in nature. So it's our opinion that the proposed development meets all 4 tests of the Planning Act and represents good land use planning. Thank you.
Thank you. The planning department, however, opposes this application. Ms. Linker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Staff object to the proposed variance as we are of the opinion that it deviates from the intent of the streetscape character analysis provisions. The streetscape character analysis is an objective count of building elements on the site, and they're intended to encourage development to maintain the character of the existing homes on the street. We believe that the front-facing attached garage deviates from the intent of the official plan and zoning bylaw in this respect.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Linker. We also have on the speakers list, Mr. Rose from the Old Ottawa East Community Association, and that's our understanding if the Old Ottawa East Community Association also opposes this application. Is Mr. Rose there?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you very much.
Your address for the record, please.
264 Main Street, Ottawa.
Okay. All right. Please proceed, Mr. Rose.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I have about a 5-minute presentation, but may I request an extra minute at the end to address a couple of issues that have been brought up in the applicant's presentation?
We need, if you can do that, certainly, Mr. Rose, please.
Sure.
Proceed.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's my honor to appear before you today on behalf of the Old Ottawa East Community Association Planning Committee. To begin, I'd like to commend Ms. Sewer for reaching out to the Community Association. We recognize that this is not required, but it is always appreciated and frequently helps to resolve issues. We are in complete agreement with the department's assessment and opposition to this request. As the department points out, the request for a front-facing garage is also inconsistent with the official plan. In particular, that a front-facing garage is inconsistent with development within the inner urban transect. Furthermore, the Old Ottawa East Secondary Plan clearly states in paragraph 24 of section 3.4, which refers to the policy area in which 94 Mason Terrace is located, maintain, and I quote, maintain the traditional pattern of pedestrian priority along the street with any garages relegated to the side or rear of homes and not projecting forward or otherwise dominating the building facade. The projected garage is clearly contrary to the general intent and purpose of the official plan and to the Old Ottawa East secondary plan. We do not believe that the proposed minor variance meets the 4 tests. It does not maintain the general intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw, test number 3. The intent of the zoning bylaw is to maintain the dominant character of the street and to maintain the traditional pattern of pedestrian priority along the street as demonstrated by a streetscape analysis. The streetscape analysis demonstrates that only 2 of the 17 included residences, both of which are located on large lots at the extreme end of the street, have front-facing garages. Allowing this minor variance would permit construction of the only front-facing garage along this section of Mason Terrace built since the introduction of the bylaw. We also believe that the request does not maintain the general intent and purpose of the official plan, test number 4. As previously stated and as pointed out by the department's report, the official plan states that a front-facing garage is inconsistent with the requirement of the interurban transect. But even more germane, the Old Ottawa East secondary plan, which takes precedence over the official plan, directs that for this area of the community, any garage must be relegated to the side or rear of homes. It is not minor because there are ways of accommodating car storage on this size lot that are consistent with zoning. A cantilevered storage is only one option. A garage in the rear yard is also an option which would meet the requirements of the bylaw. There are no circumstances particular to this property which prevent the owner from developing in a way which conforms to the zoning bylaw. The property already has a garage in the rear yard and has the option of doing so again. In conclusion, the request does not meet the general intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw. It does not meet the general intent and purpose of the official plan, and it is not minor. We urge the panel to deny this application. Now, couple of supplementary comments. Mr. Chair, the streetscape analysis is required to determine the character of the street. There are, with 2 exceptions at the far end, no front-facing garages on this street. There are lots of them in the neighborhood, granted, but the streetscape analysis determines the street, and the street determines your rules. So we do not believe that the presence of front-facing garages in the adjoining neighborhood is relevant. The diagram that was shown of a cantilevered,
Please continue.
thank you, of a cantilevered lot or storage area was actually taken from a demonstration of how to accommodate parking on a narrow split lot. And I believe it was taken from the recent discussion paper monitoring of infill 1 and 2. It is probably appropriate for a narrow split lot, but it is not the only option, as I stated before, not the only option for a lot of this size. Lastly, Mr. Chair, I don't think that having a garage recessed 0.6 meters into the front facade of a house qualifies as being on the side or at the rear. Thank you very much for your attention, Mr. Chair.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Rose. Ms. Linker, did the department review the Old Ottawa East secondary plan provisions for this area regarding garages when they reviewed the application?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
And do you have the language of that particular provision from the old Ottawa East secondary plan on hand?
Yes, I do, Mr. Chair.
And could you read that to us? Mr. Rose already did, but I'd like to hear it again. For the benefit of the rest
Of
of
course. Policy 24 states that traditional pattern of pedestrian priority along the street will be maintained with any garage relegated to the side or rear of homes and not projecting forward or otherwise dominating the building facade. My apologies, this is not a direct quote. This is from the staff report.
Okay.
I have the direct quote if you wish, Mr. Chair.
All right, Mr. Rose, please.
Paragraph 24 of policy 3.4, quote, maintain the traditional pattern of pedestrian priority along the street with any garages relegated to the side or rear of homes and not projecting forward or otherwise dominating the building facade, end of quote.
Okay. All right. Ms. Sewer, you've heard from the opposition. We have not only the streetscape character analysis, but the old Ottawa East secondary plan that says these are not permitted.
Mr. Chair, if I may respond.
Mr. Chown, please do.
So I apologize. I'm having difficulty starting my video. I'm getting a notification that I cannot start my video because the host has stopped it. I don't know if that's true or not. Oh, here we go.
We can hear you, Mr. Chown. That's fine.
They can hear me and now you can see me. Yes. So while I'm speaking, if I could ask the committee coordinator to pull up the slide in our presentation package that immediately follows the thank you slide. But I want to speak directly to policy 24 in the old Ottawa East secondary plan, because certainly Mr. Rose has raised it in his submissions and Mr. Goodkey did in his written submissions to the committee.
Yeah.
And I want to walk through it just carefully. Firstly, it says maintain the traditional pattern of pedestrian priority along the street. So the application before you has absolutely no impact on the pedestrian priority along the street. A driveway exists today. A driveway is permitted as of right going forward. So the existence of a driveway which would break up the sidewalk or the pedestrian priority exists today and is permitted as of right. The variance before you dealing with whether or not we can have a front-facing garage has absolutely nothing to do with pedestrian priority along the street. Policy again goes on to say with any garages relegated to the side or rear yard of homes, and I'll come back to that. And then it says, and not projecting forward to otherwise dominating the building facade. The front-facing garage that's before you today does not project forward of the rest of the home. It is in fact recessed. So it fully conforms with that provision of the policy. So the only gray area is the language that says relegated to the side or rear of homes. And I'm not sure what relegated to the side means, but this garage clearly is not in front of the house. I agree it's not at the rear of the house, but I believe that it's at the side of the house. When you look at, we'll go back there in just a moment, but when we go back and look at the renderings that have been provided to the committee, included in Ms. Sewer's presentation, it's clear that the garage is not projecting forward of the existing home, and it's clear that this application doesn't interfere with the pattern of pedestrian priority on the street. I would point out that staff, in fact, amended their submissions to the committee and have removed the statement that this application is inconsistent with that policy. And Mr. Rose may not have been aware of that when he made his submissions. Certainly Mr. Goodkey would not have been aware of that when he made his submissions. Mr. Chair, members of the committee, I put up this image for your benefit. This is Clegg Street in Old Ottawa East. Clegg Street is part of the Greystone Village development, a development that was subject to extensive consultations between the developer, the neighborhoods, and the Old Ottawa East Community Association. What you see here is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, maybe even 8 single detached homes with front-facing garages. There is no suggestion that I'm aware of that the Old Ottawa East Community Association had concerns with respect to these front-facing garages, despite policies in the Old Ottawa East secondary plan. I would urge you to approve the applications. The alternative, which is the cantilevered, if the committee coordinator could find one of the two renderings of the front of the building, I'd appreciate it. Thank you, this is fine. The alternative, as of right solution, is to eliminate the garage door, open up that space to the street, and park your car there, store your garbage there, store your recycling there, store your bicycles there, store your lawnmower, etc., in full view of the street. The alternative, as of right, for this property doesn't fit on the street. It's our opinion, shared by the immediate neighbors, that this is the preferred solution. We'd encourage the committee to approve the application as filed. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Chown. All right, so Ms. Linker, so as far as the department is concerned, there is no longer an issue of non-compliance with the Old Ottawa East secondary plan.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the department has removed the word prohibited from the report in terms of it being prohibited in the secondary plan. However, there's still concerns that it doesn't align well with the policies of the secondary plan. Staff received opinion from other city staff on what the interpretation of relegated to the side means, and staff's interpretation of this policy is that its intent is for the garage to not dominate the facade and should be further back and or not directly incorporated into the building facade. Staff don't believe that the current proposed garage, even if not forward from the rest of the facade, does a sufficient job of avoiding being dominant in terms of being a feature on the facade, where the intent is to relegate it to the side or rear of the main building.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Ms.
Mr.
Linker.
Chair, may I respond?
Very briefly, Mr. Rose.
Thank you very much. You saw a slide of photos on Clegg Avenue of houses with front-facing garages, and the comment was made that there was no objection from the community association. The reason there were no objections from the community association is that we had no basis within our secondary plan to do so. The only reference in the Old Ottawa East secondary plan to garages is in policy area number 4, which is the area that 49 Mason Terrace exists in. So the area of those buildings on Clegg is in a policy area that is a new development, the Greystone development, and there was no facility in our secondary plan to prohibit those. Again, I suggest that there is an alternative to the cantilevered space, that being a garage in the rear of the building, exactly what exists now. And that would be more in keeping with the general character of the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rose. Any questions or comments from the members of the panel regarding this application? Given the apparent, to a certain extent, the apparent conflict between the Old Ottawa East secondary plan and this application, should we reserve to further discuss this application? Mr. Wildman?
Chair, I'm happy to do that if that is will of the rest of the committee. It was an interesting discussion. I just want to say, if I could, I know it's a little off topic, but everyone who presented today did a very good job. Ms. Swersh, you've done 2 presentations today. You stuck to the timelines and you were very succinct. So thank you very much for that. Mr. Rose, I thought your presentation was quite well done as well. But Mr. Chair, if you wish, I'd be happy to go into reserve.
Yeah, I think we should discuss further. And yes, ladies and gentlemen who presented, thank you for the Christmas present. Of on time. I think what we shall do is we'll reserve on this application, and you will hear from us within 10 days with a written notice. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, might I ask the Secretariat to send a copy of the revised Planning Department opinion?
Is that a possibility? Ms.
Will
Byers?
do, Mr. Chair.
Okay. All right, Mr. Rose, we'll send you
Thank
a
you.
copy. Okay.
Thank you.
25 cents a page.
Awesome. Make it a small font.
Okay. All right. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
The next application before us, we're into the adjourned from previous hearings section of our agenda today is item 7. This is 16 Lowrey Street. This was adjourned on the 5th of October, sine die. This is an application to permit an interrupted path with reduced width for the movement of garbage containers, reduced recessed front facade setback, and reduced rear and side yard setbacks for the conversion of the current dwelling into a 4-unit low-rise apartment. And the agent for the applicant is Amanda Sanford. Is she there? Can't hear you.
I apologize. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. I'm Amanda Sanford. I'm located at 108 Bridge Street.
Okay, for your address for the record, please.
Sure. It's 108 Bridge Street in Picton, Ontario.
Okay. All right, we'll have to administer the oath or solemn declaration. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the notice provided to you as part of the application process and by the committee was posted at the property to which the application applies for the prescribed number of days before the hearing and clearly visible and legible during the entirety of that time?
Yes, I do.
Okay. So I'm just gonna a little bit of a cleanup here. There are some amendments to the application that Pred has noted, and for variance A, to permit a reduced rear yard setback of 7.25 meters and a rear yard area of 22.6% has been added, or 24% of the lot depth, whereas the bylaw requires a minimum side yard setback of 9.05 meters, or 30% of the lot depth, and as also added, and a minimum rear yard area of 25%. Variance B, to permit a reduced and northerly is struck and a reduced interior side yard setback of 1.2 meters, whereas the bylaw requires a minimum interior side yard setback of 1.5. And that amendment means that variance C can be eliminated because the amendment covers both side yards under variance B.
That's correct.
Okay. I have one question. The order to comply that was issued in 2020, that has been met.
Yes, it has been.
Okay. And one thing I think we need to understand from you is there or is there not a driveway on the property, and you can do that during your presentation.
Sure.
So the planning department has no concerns with the application. At this time, we have one neighbor who is on the speakers list. Anyway, if you'd like to proceed very briefly, please, with this application.
Sure, I'll try to keep it as brief as possible. So we've looked at 16 Lowrey, we've constructed a triplex, and we now wish to convert that to a 4-unit low-rise apartment dwelling. And so to do so, we have to submit a minor variance application, which consists of the 5 variances that you have outlined here today. So this is our second circulation of this application. We had some concerns regarding the parking and the driveway. These came primarily from the neighborhood association. And truly the owners want to comply with the neighborhood's desire to not have the parking in here. So as a result, we decided that it was going to be best for the application just to simply remove that requirement. Now, with that being said, I know there has been some more community concerns that have come up, specifically regarding the reduction to 1.5 meters for from 1.5 meters to 1.2 meters for the side yard setback. And we just want to say that we've gone through and we've really carefully evaluated that as well to ensure that we can do our best. So we do have an encroaching property from 18 Lowrey, which reduces our egress path and garbage path to a width of 0.9 meters. So we've looked at that requirement from an egress point of view. From the building code perspective, we do have the required egress path. This wall is also fire protected for us, but we've added these 2 additional variances surrounding the garbage path to help address the community's concerns with that. And what we believe we've achieved here is by allowing these 2 additional variances regarding the garbage path, we're allowing garbage to move from either side of the building. And this includes the steps that are required due to the grading change on the north side of the building, as well as the reduced width on the south side of the building as well too. So those are really our primary concerns that we've had kind of moving into this. And I think that's what we wish to address in the hearing today.
All right. So we had A, B, and C the first go around. We've now added D, E, and F. So
Correct.
if you would to each of those variances, please apply the 4 tests.
Sure. So regarding minor variance D, we do believe that the reduction in garbage path to 0.9 meters is minor in nature. The reason for that being is that we have met the egress requirements. And I think without that, that really changes this. But the application itself is desirable for the appropriate development for the lands in question and does comply to the general intent of the zoning bylaw, whereas low-rise apartment dwellings are permitted. And this is also supported and conforms to the general intent of the official plan, as it does support the intensification and densifications of these units. And so regarding minor variance E, this is where we're allowing for an interrupted pathway, and this is going to allow for the window wells, also for these stairs. So we consider this application to be minor in nature. And the reason for that is building code has specific requirements that require egress pathways and ramps to meet certain specifications. If we were to make this pathway to be a ramp, we would actually be not going with the Ontario Building Code, and that would ultimately be problematic. And furthermore, we believe that that would require us to make extensive modifications to our foundations to require that depression in grade. And we think that that would cause a further detriment to the house located at 18 Lowrey Street. And then just to go further, so we do believe that this is also desirable for the appropriate development of the lands in question and conforms to the general intent of the zoning bylaw, as low-rise buildings are permitted use. And then it is further supported by the general intent of the official plan.
Okay. I think there were some questions from the other members regarding these pathways, Ms. McLean, and the driveway.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you just confirm that the parking space that was shown earlier in the site plan is no longer there? Is that what I'm hearing?
That's correct. We've removed the parking space for it. The building was initially designed to sort of accommodate a parking spot there outside of the front yard into the side yard. However, once the building was constructed, we do have some gas meters and stuff, as the community generally pointed out. And as such, we could not achieve a 2.6 width for the parking space with the landscaping buffer. And then furthermore, parking is not permitted on lots with this lot area. And so as such, we just felt like this is going to be a huge hurdle to overcome. And we also generally want to be cooperative with the neighborhood and what it is that they're asking us for. So for that reason, we decided that it was for the best to remove.
So is there any consideration of making that area an enclosed garbage area, or?
So we have a garbage room in the building, and we also have an accessory shed located at the rear, which can accommodate garbage.
So if we could put the site plan up again, can you take us around the route of the path for garbage removal?
Sure. Okay, so the garbage room is located here. I don't know if you can see my screen, but there's an apartment entrance which goes up to the second and third story on the north side of the building. And directly beside that is the garbage room. So the dashed arrow represents what we've established as the egress path. And currently this represents the garbage route as well. So the reason for that is that we have a fire rated wall on the south side of this building, and that gives us the egress requirement that we have. So any openings in that wall are fire rated windows, and there's no window wells or anything that interrupt the width of that pathway. So we've maintained 1.2 meters along the property line, other than where the encroachment of 18 Lowrey is. Now with that, so that's egress, but in terms of the garbage path and why that got sort of clustered together with the egress path is on the north side of the building, we have both stairs and window wells, which interrupt the pathway for this garbage movement. So as such, it can be done compliantly on the south side. But again, in addressing the neighborhood's concern and the fact that we do have a reduced width because of an encroachment, this is why we've decided to proceed with these variances.
Okay, thank you. And my last question is, there were approvals for the 3-unit 2018, 2019. I understand that triplex was constructed in 2021. I'm just wondering what's changed and why now. I don't want to make sure that there's no end run here, that we apply for one thing and then now we want to do something different within a very short time frame. So can you just address that?
Sure. So we actually applied for 2 different variances with the initial triplex, with the first one being a reduction in lot width and lot area. And upon submitting our building permit application, there were some revisions that had to happen to accommodate the hydro lines, resulting in the reduction in the rear area and rear yard setback. So both of those were addressed. Now, at the time, the developers had developed the triplex with the opportunity for them to live in it for a year in the lower unit, which was essentially constructed as an up and down unit, which, accommodated their whole family. And ultimately, I think living in the neighborhood, they felt that it was just not conducive to the type of family living. I think their children who were still in high school just didn't feel as though there was enough of that representation in the neighborhood and so forth. And so as a result, they decided it was best to withdraw from living from that environment. And as such, we wanted to develop the basement into a 4th unit.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions from the members of the panel, Mr. Wildman?
If the committee coordinator could put that same plan back up and zoom in just as she had done a moment ago. I just want to go back to the garbage pathway just for a quick second. So if you're on the north side and looking at the garbage room, there's 2 steps just, I guess, to the east of that. Those steps, do they have to be steps, or could it be ramped down to the corner of the building?
So we could potentially look at ramping it. However, we do have to ensure that we're meeting a minimum requirement of 1 in 10 for the ramp slope. So just to be clear, if I were to slant that from that garbage room to the front area around the principal entrance, as indicated, I'm essentially creating a walkout basement. for this unit. And ultimately, we have a very shallow foundation located at 18 Lowrey behind us, or beside us, excuse me. And we don't believe that we would be able to support his house with a walk-in basement. And then furthermore, we do have the sump pit as well there without the sewer connection. And at that elevation height, I don't think that we would be able to properly drain this foundation.
So where's the sump pit?
It's currently located, it's discharged through the window well.
The side window wells or
The front window well.
the front window well?
Yeah,
Okay.
if you zoom into the front, there's a window well there, and then we have a splash pad, and that's where we're indicating that the sump pump is being discharged from.
Yeah. So back to those two steps, that would be roughly about 16 inches or so. And so making up 16 inches over that big, long stretch, I don't see that as being a significant impediment. As we go around the corner down to the pinch point where the 0.9 is, then we have at the front, I think it says principal entrance. It's a little blurry now, but
It does, yes.
there's a landing like step. So there's one step down to that larger landing. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And then there's another 1, 2, 3, 4 steps down to the street line, I guess.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, and
So-
ultimately, I saw those front steps as being part of that interrupted pathway. Because again, I think the slope from where that path ends to where the street level begins is not, it's too steep of a slope to adequately meet an egress ramp requirement. And part of our first circulation, the planner that we were working with as well too, had also brought forth, if we create a ramp, then we are also creating more projections into side yard requirements under section 65. And as such, we then began to question whether or not more variances are needed.
Right. And you've never looked at, or I shouldn't say that, I'm starting to sound like a lawyer here. Have you looked at having the garbage room on sort of the west side of the windows, or does that throw everything off the window wells on the north side?
So I think ultimately, because the building was designed and we have a garbage room in that location, and it meets the requirements of section 143. So I think to move that into a different location, we don't have that opportunity to do so within the building.
Okay.
I think that would be kind of a challenge. And then ultimately, we kind of have a dead space that wouldn't be used, and it would be kind of a bit of a wastrel to do so. But we do also have that garden shed as well too, which could be an opportunity to store garbage if it was, more required to be outside of the building. But we do believe in trying to keep the streetscape as clean as we can. And so I'm not sure if we're going to want to store garbage kind of underneath that cantilevered area, which was once intended to be a parking spot.
Right. Yeah, I wasn't suggesting that it would be open. Just wondered if it could be tucked in there. And then you sort of almost eliminate all of your issues with respect to that variance. Okay, thank you for answering my questions.
Sure, no problem. Thank you.
So when you're pulling your green bin out of the garbage room and around the corner of the building, how many steps are you going down to get to the street?
So there's going to be 2 steps to come off of the garbage room door. And then you're going to walk around the building in a relatively level area. And then there's going to be an additional 4 steps from that pathway area to the street area. Now, also too, I really want to bring up the fact that applying for these variances allows occupants to use also the north side of the building now as a garbage path. So there are 4 steps there. It's less interrupted. The slope is a little bit more soft and gentle, and then could therefore pass. So by allowing us to have these variances for garbage path width, that really eliminates the confusion going, okay, well, people have to go all the way around the building, because ultimately we see that there's a likeliness they're going to take the path of least resistance, and that's going to be on the north side of the building. So again, we think these variances are going to open up that opportunity, and it's going to help resolve that.
Okay. Any other questions, comments from the members of the panel? Thank you, Ms. Seifert. We also have, well, I note that the, and I think you're aware that the Hittenberg Community Association is opposing these variances. You're aware of that?
Yeah, absolutely. We received a letter from them. We believe that they're in opposition of the reduction of the 1.5 meter setback. And this is because of the encroachment and the reduced width that we have as a result. But we do believe through our second circulation that we've addressed a majority of their concerns. And primarily that was removing the parking space.
Okay. All right. We also have Miss Hart, who was a neighbor. I believe she's online.
Yes, I am.
And your address for the record, please.
132 Bayview Station Road.
Okay. All right. To the application, please.
Okay. So I'm certainly opposed to the requested minor variances E and F on this application. Thank you for bringing up that slide. So it took me a while to sort of understand this. So the 1.2 meters is the setback from the side yard. However, there's the obstruction in the way, which is the neighbor's foundation. And that brings it down to, from what I could see on the plans when I blew it up as far as I could, 0.98 meters.
That's correct.
And then where you have on the left side of that diagram there is the electrical conduit for the building that goes in, and that narrows down to the 0.9 meters. And certainly the concern that I have is using this as a garbage pathway or egress. During the winter time, you have 2 3-story buildings here where you can't put the snow anyplace. You're going to have to shovel it sort of most the length of the long building, either to the front or the back. There also are some icicles that form on the eaves of the neighbor's roof, which will fall into this path. So it's quite dangerous. And bringing weekly garbage in and out of this area and bonking them against that electrical conduit is certainly just a concern. When you get to -20, -30, plastic gets much more brittle. So this really isn't a good plan. And that taking it all that distance from, and the presenter had the directions wrong. This is the north side, not the south side of the building, but taking it all the way around the building, down this pathway, then down 5 or 6 steps is just not a logical route for this. And I understand on the other side, which is this slide here, you do have those grates. They are minor at the moment. This is the path that everyone has used, both for garbage and for access and egress. Those steps where you have the landing there could be made much larger and therefore easily accommodate. And you would only have maybe 3 steps in total to get down to the street, or possibly it could be sloped appropriately as well. And as long as your sump pump exudate doesn't run onto this pathway, it should be relatively safe. And I would hope you would slope the land appropriately for that. So this really needs to be the pathway. The other pathway is just not logical and it's dangerous, I would submit. So this pathway looks to be, it's supposed to be 1.2 meters in width, less those little grates there, but that still appears to be wider than the 0.9 meters on the other side. And if you actually chopped out the tree stump, which is just on the left-hand side close to the steps, you would get more width. Just leaving the tree stump there in the middle of the pathway, again, just really isn't very logical. And it's very nice to hear that you want to be cooperative with the neighbors, because a fence along here would provide privacy. And I know this isn't part of the variance, but it would provide privacy for both the tenants and the neighbor to the south. It would also, and I'm hoping that the lighting plan you submitted in your last iteration will be incorporated and will be part of this plan as well, because the light you have right now shines directly into the neighbor's windows. So it would be very nice neighborly thing to fix those issues. So I submit that this variance for this pathway, so both variances E and F, don't conform to the general intent of the bylaw, and they're certainly not desirable for the development of this property. And if I could ask to have variance A sent to us, because there was a change there which I couldn't copy down quickly enough as you're reading it out. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Barrett. Any questions or comments from the members of the panel on this? A response from the applicant's agent?
Sure. So, Mrs. Parrott, we appreciate your opinion and thank you very much for coming to the hearing today. So we just wanted to evaluate the fact that we do agree there's a more logical pathway here that doesn't go all the way around the building. We can't change the egress path. That was approved as a condition to the occupancy to the triplex dwellings. So unfortunately, the egress path is there. There's a fire rated wall. We can't change that side of it. However, by applying for the additional variances to allow for the reduced width in the garbage pathway means that we can use the other side of the building, because now we can have an interrupted pathway. This is going to allow for the stairs that we need to properly meet the building code requirements here. This also identifies, okay, yes, there are window wells. There are grates that we have on those window wells, as Mrs. Parrott has identified. However, they are not adequate for distributed weight loads, such as a person walking over them. So as a result, they can't be considered part of our pathway. But with that window well, it's a 0.3 meter window well. We have 1.2 meter setback. We're going to be able to have a 0.9 meter pathway on that side, as well as the other side of the building, which ultimately is going to address the concerns that we brought forth today in having 18 Lowrey's foundation encroach on our on 16 Lowrey on our property here.
Right. If the committee were to approve this application in part and deny applicant variances E and F, then what?
So I think ultimately that would prohibit us from adding an additional dwelling into the basement, but isn't going to do anything for the dwelling units that are currently there. So we have 3 dwelling units. This was designed at a time where that was not a requirement. And, you know, furthermore, I think these variances have been added to really sort of address these concerns, to allow occupants to legally use both pathways here. But I think the fact remains, and I really want to emphasize this again, we've maintained a 1.2 meter setback. That's the legal requirement for the triplex when it was built. And then this is maintained along the property line between 16 and 18 Lowrey. The issue is that we do have an encroaching foundation that ultimately, I think through attrition, is not going to be, you know, a long-term building in the long run.
So you're saying that when was this building constructed?
I believe it was constructed circa 1900.
No, the
so 16 Lowrey, the triplex, was built circa 2021.
Okay. And there were no issues with the garbage pathway at that point?
No, at that point we were able to pass with it. The garbage path has maintained because we have that waste room. That was part of the initial design. And I think ultimately having the egress path and having to fire rate the windows, it was what sort of generated us to go around the building, because we do have less openings. We don't have window wells because we cannot variate from building code. So if we need that legal egress path, it has to be 0.9 meters. There's no relief for that in any shape or form.
The original design of the building, your egress for your garbage was out of the basement to the front of the house, to the front of the building?
That's correct. And the garbage is on the main level, not the basement.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Ms. Parrott, for your input, especially the visuals. I think what the committee is going to do is we're going to reserve on this application and just further discuss what we've heard today.
Okay.
And you will hear from us by way of a registered letter within 10 days. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So application on today's agenda is item number 8, 260 Armstrong Street. This was adjourned for recirculation on the 19th of October. There were site plan issues that needed to be resolved. And I believe there was also further discussion with the neighbors that the applicant was prepared to undertake. So this is an application to permit a reduced lot area and front yard setback for the construction of a low-rise apartment dwelling. The total area amenity space requirement has been resolved. The agent for this application is Mr. Robinson. Mr. Robinson,
Chairman,
your address for the record, please.
100 Palomino, Ottawa, K2M 1N3.
Yep. Okay, do you solemnly swear or affirm that the notice provided to you as part of the application process and by the committee was posted at the property to which the application applies for the prescribed number of days before the hearing and clearly visible and legible during the entirety of that time?
I do swear that to be true.
Okay, so back in October, we adjourned this for further discussions with neighbors and to satisfy the concerns of the planning department regarding site plan. So please, Mr. Robinson, briefly.
Thank you. Since then, on November 14th, myself and the owner of the property and our arborist met on site with the property owner to the south, which is on Hamilton Street. We had a meeting with him. We discussed the tree in question. The arborist has been in discussions with the city forester, and city forestry are satisfied that this is not a boundary tree. And my understanding is that they are would be willing to issue a permit for the removal of that tree. We have since modified the plans to remove variance B, which is related to the total amenity area by having some larger rear yard balconies on the second and third floor. They're no closer to the rear property line, but they occupy more of the rear wall of the building. And we've had discussions with Miss Linker, the committee planner, and Miss Wakula, who is the file lead planner for the site plan application, which I received an email from this morning indicating that due to Bill 23 and the number of units being proposed, the site plan application is not going to be necessary.
Yeah, that's correct.
So that's where we are. We have on board letter in support recently from the Hintonburg Community Association. We had a letter or an email previously from the property owner to the west at 262 are a 4-unit building on a lot that is smaller than our property. Our variances are related to having a reduced lot area. It's a bit of an unusual lot area value of 464 square meters, which the zoning is sold that I think it was in square feet originally, because that's 5,000 square feet. So we have 252 square meters. It's an existing situation. We've designed a building that is in scale with that size. There are other properties in the area that are that size or smaller in terms of our front yard setback. The zoning, which is kind of unusual, has a 3-meter setback for this MC zone. We're proposing 1.3 meters. The property to the west, I believe, has a 2-meter setback, but their existing building is 1.25. And They are proposing a 0 meter setback in their application that's going through the planning department and the planning committee. So we have two variances, and they are related to an existing situation, which is lot area, and to request a reduced front yard setback to 1.3 meters for this 6-unit building. Thank you.
And we note that the planning department has no objection to the reduction in the front yard setback.
Correct.
And I don't believe they have an objection to the reduction in lot area.
Correct.
And Ms. Linker, as far as the amenity open space requirement is concerned, how was the correct amount or the minimal amount of amenity open space found? Is this being picked up by the balconies?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In the zoning bylaw, amenity area is defined as the total passive or active recreational area provided on a lot for the personal, shared, or communal use of the residents of the building or buildings, and includes balconies, patios, rooftop gardens, and other similar features, but does not include indoor laundry or locker features. The applicant has shown on the plans that they have provided the minimum amount of amenity area. The minimum was 36 square meters in total, which they're required 18 square meters of communal amenity area. I believe that the amenity area was provided in the form of balconies for private amenity and in the form of rear yard area for communal amenity. However, Mr. Robinson can correct me if that's incorrect.
So the communal amenity area, Mr. Robinson, meets the requirement?
Yes, we have more than the 18 square meters in the rear yard.
So therefore, we can delete variance B.
Correct.
We're dealing with the just A, which is a lot reduction to 252 square meters and a setback to 1.3.
Correct.
Okay. Any questions, comments from members of the panel on this application? We have a registered speaker on this application, Slava Jetnov with 8 Hamilton Avenue, I believe.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, can.
All right, wonderful. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. This is Slava Zhdanov. I'm the resident and one of the owners of 8 Hamilton Avenue, the property to the south.
Okay, please proceed.
I didn't have particular comments prepared because I only have the documentation originally submitted for the meeting on October 16th. But based on what is available attached to today's minutes, I don't see that the balconies have been expanded. They appear to be the exact same size as in the previous iteration, but the number has been increased to 36 square meters. There was one of the things that we discussed was adding a note to the applications to leave the existing fences, which I thought I saw somewhere, and now I cannot see once more. And the tree aspect, I don't think is being, either I'm entirely out of the loop or it's not being correctly represented for the purposes of the current state. As far as the application itself goes, I've submitted my comments for October 16th. Do you still have them available?
Yep, we do.
Okay, so yes, essentially my concern is that as far as the minor variances themselves go, is that this is neither minor nor necessarily desirable. It seems to be going against the purpose of this particular zoning and is functionally a rezoning request submitted as a minor variance. There is some strange history for this particular lot and the adjacent that I was hoping would be resolved with the city, but seems like it either has not been or is basically being done in parallel in order to expedite the project. Let me see here. And so functionally, the aspect of the required setback and as far as the tree is concerned, the tree would need to be removed in order to allow for the currently planned setback of 3.5 meters. Any less than that would result in a building that I'm informed would not be economically viable. The downside of the comments as I have them available is that the forester's notice is not mentioning anything regarding being authoritative on the ownership or the status of the tree as private versus boundary tree, and sends that authority to the survey. The survey, as far as I'm aware, has not been updated to reflect anything other than what's currently displayed, which I'm told is just a typographical error. But at the same time, my understanding is that the problem of the tree is not that it is clearly a private tree, but that it is in the gray zone where either side could argue whichever. That's outside of the scope, and just addressing the comments made earlier. But yeah, as far as the purposes of the minor variances, it is, in my view, still not minor. And I have closed the tab, and now I can't find the other 4 tests. Would you be able to provide them for me?
Does it meet the intent and purpose of the official plan? Does it meet the intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw? Is it desirable for the appropriate development or use of the land?
As far as I am understanding, it would not be minor, it would not be desirable, it would not meet the zoning intent, but that's depending on whether you count the exception as part of the zoning intent or not. That is functionally my comments for this application.
Thank you. Mr. President Robinson, would you like to respond?
Thank you. Some of the items that Mr. Jetnoff has brought up were discussed on site. We are the drawings that were submitted to the committee after the adjournment request do show a wider balcony on the 2nd and 3rd floor to meet the requirements. Now that, yes, thank you very much. So there is the difference. On the left was the original, and on the right is the new. And then in terms of fencing, we committed to Mr. Jetnoff on site that the existing fence that is the rear lot line of 260 Armstrong and is the side lot line of 8 Hamilton will be maintained. He wanted to ensure that that would be maintained. And the tree in question, the trunk is fully on 260 Armstrong, and what is known as the root flare, which is the very bottom of the tree, does extend about 10 centimeters into the property at 8 Hamilton, but it is our understanding that that is not the measurement by which it is determined whether the tree is a boundary tree or not. We would have to increase the rear yard setback to about 4.3 meters and then do some canopy trimming to avoid conflict with the foundations and the building itself. And we'd have to have the building in excess of more than 5 meters to avoid any canopy trimming. So it just makes a very small building that just isn't economically viable. So we've received indication from forestry that they are in agreement with this tree being removed. There are some other trees that this tree is getting entangled with. Thank you. That's the that tree. That photo is taken on the property at 8 Hamilton. You can see the fence, and then the tree itself is beyond in the rear yard of 260 Armstrong. And then to the left of this, there are other trees that are in the rear yard of a building on Hinton. and all of the trees in the area are all getting tangled up in one another. So if this tree at 260 Armstrong is removed, it allows us to build the building. And we're proposing in the rear yard a medium-sized tree. I think it's called a maidenhair tree, and it's a tree that works well in areas of a relatively narrow frontage, and it would be planted in the close to where the existing tree is, so it wouldn't conflict with the balconies. There's existing examples of a maidenhair tree at the theater company building at Wellington Street and Holland, I believe. So those are my responses. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Robinson. Is someone from the forestry department online right now? Wondering if Miss Young is there. Go.
Hi there. Sorry, I was not a panelist.
That's all right. So, Miss Young, regarding this this property and the tree removal at 260 Armstrong, just give us your perspective, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. From the documentation I've received from the applicant's forester, they've clearly shown that the tree is on private property on 260 Armstrong. That's the accepted definition that we use under the Forestry Act. So if the neighbor wishes to dispute that, they can also get an opinion from a forester. And that is a civil matter that's kind of totally outside of this realm. Yep. There is a dispute process for that, but from what I've been presented, I'm comfortable that this is solely owned by the applicant here.
So if it's a boundary tree, half of the trunk has to be on the other property?
No, any part of the trunk. So even if it's 1 centimeter of the trunk and not that root flare that was shown on the picture that Mr. Robinson posted, if it's between the root flare and the first branch, that is the accepted definition. Any part of the trunk that crosses the property line, then it's considered jointly owned and permission would be required from any shared owner.
And in this instance, the trunk is completely on the property at 260 Armstrong.
From what's been presented to me, yes, that is the case.
And that is not a distinctive tree from the size of it. I'm looking at it. I don't believe.
I believe it is. I think they said it's.
Okay, so they'll have to have a permit to remove it.
Yes, it's 54 centimeters, so it is a protected tree and would require a permit. And if it is disputed and is considered to be a jointly owned tree, then permission would be required from the shared owner in order to remove it.
Okay, so the property owner at 8 Hamilton has options regarding this. And they can dispute the whether or not this tree is a boundary tree or not.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Young.
Welcome.
Any questions, comments from the panel regarding this application? Okay. I've seen that Fred has removed his objection. Site plan issues seem to have been addressed. The tree issue, I would imagine, is going to be between the applicants, the property owner at 260 Armstrong and the property owner at Hamilton, which is beyond our purview. We have an amended application before us, which removes variance B regarding amenity area, leaving us with just a lot width reduction to 252 square meters and a reduced front yard setback to 1.3 meters, not opposed by the planning department. So with that, as far as the amended application is concerned, all in favor of approving this.
Apologies, Mr. Chair. The document I have in front of me from October 19th and comments of the planning department is labeled as some concerns. Has that been revised?
They have some concerns, but we've considered them, and we're about to vote on this application. So, all in favor of approving the application as amended? Your application is approved. Mr. Robinson, good luck with your project.
Thank you very much. Have a good Christmas season. Bye-bye.
You too. Okay. Next application before us, let me see here. Is item 9. This is another adjourned application, adjourned signing date on October the 19th, 2022, 307 Picton Avenue. And this is an application to permit reduced lot width and area, reduced front yard, interior side yard setbacks, increased number of parking spaces, reduced soft landscaping rectangular area in the rear yard for the conversion of an existing 3-unit dwelling to a low-rise apartment building through establishment of a basement unit. The agent for the applicant is Mr. Miller. Is he there?
Mr. Chair, Murray Chown speaking. I would like to make a couple of brief comments after Mr. Miller's presentation, if I may.
Yep.
Thank you.
No problem, Mr. Chown. Mr. Miller, before we begin, do you solemnly swear or affirm that the notice provided to you as part of the application process and by the committee was posted at the property to which the application applies for the prescribed number of days before the hearing and clearly visible and legible during the entirety of that time?
I do.
Okay. There are some changes to this application. I believe there are modifications to the variances. Minor variance C has been amended to permit a reduced westerly interior side yard setback of 1.2 meters, whereas the bylaw requires a minimum interior side yard setback of 1.5. And we've added 1, 2 variance D, E, F, and G. D being to permit a reduced front yard setback of 2.9 meters, whereas the bylaw requires a minimum front yard setback of 4.5 meters. E to permit a maximum of 2 motor vehicle parking spaces, whereas the bylaw does not permit motor vehicle parking. Variance F to permit reduced soft landscaping of 32 square meters in the rear yard, whereas the bylaw requires a minimum area of soft landscaping of 35 square meters in the rear yard. And variance G to permit a soft landscape rectangular area in the rear yard to be 14.2 square meters, whereas the bylaw requires a minimum of 1 aggregated softly landscaped area in the rear yard of at least 25 square meters. Are we correct on the amendments and the additions to the variances?
Mr. Chair, I'm reading, at least in my presentation, the lettering is not the same for us, but the variances you've described are correct.
Okay. All right. Okay, so this was a triplex that was constructed in 2015, correct?
Around that time, Mr. Speaker.
And if I remember correctly, the triplex was a better fit in the neighborhood than a low-rise apartment building. Anyways, that's just a comment. That's just a comment.
I guess that opinion will depend on our presentation to you, Mr. Chair.
Yes, it will, Mr. Chow. All right, Mr. Miller, if briefly, if you would, please. Understanding that the planning department still has some concerns with your application.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. The application in front of you this afternoon is a minor variance application for the property municipally known as 307 Picton Avenue. Next slide, please. The subject site is located in the Kitchissippi ward of the City of Ottawa on the north end of Picton Avenue. You can see the property on the image in front of you in relation to Westboro Beach. Next slide, please. The subject site is an interior lot on the north side of Picton Avenue. It has 9.09 meters of frontage along Picton Avenue and an area of 274 meters squared. The subject site is currently occupied by a 3-unit dwelling with a shared driveway having access off Picton Avenue. The requested variances will facilitate the conversion of the basement into a 4th unit. The land use of the subject property would change from a 3-unit dwelling to a low-rise apartment building. Next slide, please.
Yeah.
The site plan before you illustrates the bounds of the subject site and reflects the site in its existing condition, save for one additional proposed garbage enclosure in the rear yard. An established easement permits a shared driveway between 305 and 307 Picton Avenue to provide access to existing parking spaces in the rear yard. No changes are proposed to the existing building or subject property as part of this proposal. Next slide, please. The slide in front of you highlights the requested variances required to permit the conversion of the basement unit into a dwelling unit, resulting in a change of land use to a low-rise apartment. This technical change in land use brings the site's subject site out of conformity with various provisions of the zoning bylaw. Variances are required to support a reduction in lot width, lot area, minimum front yard setback, minimum interior yard setback, minimum area of soft landscaping in the rear yard, minimum size of a single aggregated softly landscaped rectangular area, and to increase increase the maximum number of permitted motor vehicle parking spaces. We will now speak briefly to the rationale for these minor variances in relation to the 4 tests outlined in section 45(1) of the Planning Act.
Okay.
Next slide, please. The first test for minor variance is that the general intent and purpose of the official plan is maintained. The subject property is designated neighborhood on Schedule B2 of the adopted City of Ottawa official plan. The purpose of this designation is to permit a mix of building forms and densities and to reinforce those neighborhoods that have all elements and presently function as a 15-minute neighborhood. The image in front of you illustrates the elements of a 15-minute neighborhood present within a 15-minute walk of the subject property. The proposed development facilitates intensification with the basement unit within a neighborhood that has existing elements of a 15-minute neighborhood. The minor variances maintain the general intent and purposes of the adopted official plan. Next slide, please. The second test for minor variances is that the general intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw is maintained. The subject property is zoned R4UB under the City of Ottawa zoning bylaw 2020-290. The purpose of the R4 zone is to, quote, allow a wide mix of residential building forms ranging from detached to low-rise apartment dwellings. The requested variances for minimum lot width and minimum lot area facilitate the provision of additional housing choices in a manner that is compatible with the existing land use patterns by providing similar lot sizes to abutting nearby lots. The requested variances for front yard setback and interior yard setback accommodate existing conditions that maintain access to the rear yard. The requested variances to permit the continued use of 2 motor vehicle parking spaces in the rear yard. The proposed 4th unit would facilitate a conversion to a permitted land use in the R4UB zone without introducing new spaces. As the requested variance would facilitate the existing lease on motor vehicle spaces, the new unit would promote use of public and active transportation. Regarding minimum area of soft landscaping in the rear yard and minimum aggregated softly landscaped rectangular area in the rear yard, the purpose of section 161.15 is to provide soft landscaping adequate to serve as amenity space. The existing building provides amenity space through balconies on the front facade. There's a variety of nearby public parks and green spaces within a 15-minute walk of the subject site. The minor variances meet the general intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw. Next slide, please. The third test for minor variance is that the minor variance is considered desirable for the use of land. The requested minor variances facilitate an appropriate form of scale and development near established neighborhood amenities and transit routes. The requested minor variances would permit a low-rise apartment and form of development already present in the neighborhood, such as the low-rise apartments on 300, 302, 304, and 306 Elm Grove Avenue. These properties are outlined in orange on the image in front of you. Next slide, please. We'll just finish up with the last test, if that's okay, Mr. Chair.
Yep, please.
Okay, 4 properties to the rear of the subject site contain low-rise apartments with the specific site-specific exception 2604, which permits low-rise apartments similar to the existing conditions on 307 Picton Avenue. These properties reflect a form of development very similar to other low-rise apartments in the neighborhood. The minor variances are considered desirable for the land of use. The 4th test for minor variance is that the variances are considered minor in nature. The proposed development will not change the building envelope of the existing 3-unit dwelling. The requested variance for minimum front yard setback would regularize an existing condition, resulting in no change to the 3-unit dwelling on the subject site. The requested variance for minimum interior side yard setback would not result in a reduction of space between the building envelope and the neighboring properties, but rather it would recognize the existing condition of the 3-unit dwelling. The requested variance for the maximum motor vehicle parking spaces would not result in an increased number of parking spaces, but rather recognizes existing parking spaces currently leased to tenants of the 3-unit dwelling. The requested variance for minimum area of soft landscaping in the rear yard would not result in a reduction of soft landscaping in the rear yard, but rather recognizes the existing landscaping conditions of the subject site. The requested variance for minimum aggregated softly landscaped rectangular area would not result in a reduction of landscaped rectangular area, but rather recognize the existing landscape conditions on the subject site. As there are no changes proposed to the landscaping or programming of the site, the requested variances would not have any impact on the streetscape or neighboring properties, but would continue to reflect the existing conditions that also reflect the character of other low-rise apartments in the neighborhood. The variances are considered minor in nature. Next slide, please. In conclusion, it is our opinion that the requested variances meet all 4 tests outlined in section 45(1) of the Planning Act and represent good land use planning. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Ms. Linker, the department still has some concerns with this application, I believe.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Staff have some concerns with the proposed conversion of a 3-unit dwelling to a low-rise apartment with respect to the variances to permit parking and reduce on-site soft landscaping. Staff note that the R4UB zone and the official plan are explicit in prioritizing soft landscaping, and the provision of parking has a secondary nature and is even prohibited on the subject site for low-rise apartments and stacked dwellings. Staff do not believe that the provision of parking spaces at the expense of on-site soft landscaping meets the intent of the zoning bylaw or official plan. Staff also note that the subject site does not require any parking and is in very close proximity to rapid transit.
Thank you, Ms. Linker. Mr. Miller, Mr. Chown, if you could respond to the planning department's concerns, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'll only take a moment. I want to be clear, and you can confirm this with Ms. Linker, that planning staff have no objections to the variances that would allow for the conversion of this triplex to a low-rise apartment by the addition of the basement unit. And I want to be clear on that.
Yeah, we're aware of that.
So their concerns relate only to the variances that would allow our clients to maintain 2 existing parking spaces where they are under a contractual obligation to provide those 2 parking spaces to existing tenants. So the decision before you is this. You can approve all of the variances requested, and our clients will then be able to move forward with the addition of another apartment unit in what is clearly a very desirable location, and staff have no objection to that and respects the existing conditions. As Mr. Miller has indicated, these variances don't result in any changes to the existing condition. Or you could approve only the variances with respect to the existing building, and you could deny the variances which are E, F, and G, which are related to the existing parking. The result of that would be that our client would not be able to add this apartment unit in a desirable location, meeting all of the city's goals and objectives with respect to intensification in neighborhoods close to traditional main streets, etc. We would have to park this project until one or another of the tenants moved out and our client no longer had that contractual obligation. I don't see any benefit in that approach. The parking is there today. It's going to be there tomorrow. It's going to be there for as long as the existing tenants with those rights are in the building. Over that course of time, which could be months, could be years, could be decades, we are losing the opportunity to add another unit, which is going to have no impact on the streetscape, but is clearly consistent with the policies of the city's new official plan. If this was a brand new construction, obviously we wouldn't be having this conversation. We know that parking would be prohibited if this was new construction. When this property was built, there was no such prohibition on parking for either a triplex or a low-rise apartment building on this property. So I understand where staff are coming from, but the effect of a decision which is consistent with their position is of little benefit to anybody, and we would urge the committee to grant all of the variances rather than just those variances associated with the conversion of the existing building to a low-rise apartment. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Since this is an existing condition, Mr. Chown, exactly how much soft landscaping in the rear yard is being provided at present?
The amount of soft landscaping being provided at the moment is 32 square meters, where the requirement is 35. We're only 3 meters short in terms of the required soft landscaping in the rear yard.
But you met the requirement when this building was put up as a triplex.
There was no requirement for soft landscaping when this was built as a triplex. This requirement relates only to the low-rise apartment use.
And as far as variance G is concerned, it's the same situation.
That's a brand new requirement that was introduced through the Westboro overlay amendment to the zoning bylaw. So that provision was not applicable to any development of this property back in 2015.
So in your professional opinion, with the addition of one more housing unit or one more dwelling unit in this building, there will still be an adequate amount of amenity, soft landscaped open space in the rear of this property?
That's our opinion, yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Chown.
Thank you for asking.
Yep. Ms. McLean, you have a question or comment?
Yes, I wonder, thank you, Mr. Chair. I wonder if I could just get clarification, excuse me, on the use of the buildings on Elm Grove that you showed on your site plan. I thought they were labeled as 3-story, 3 units. Are they low-rise apartments, or are they 3 unit?
So they were initially constructed as 3-unit buildings, and then following, in that case, a minor zoning application as opposed to a minor variance application, we were successful in getting approvals to convert them from 3-unit dwellings to 4-unit dwellings. So they, for all intents and purposes, are absolutely identical in form to what is being requested at 307 Picton. They are 4-unit low-rise apartment buildings, 2 parking spaces in the rear yard, limited landscape strip across the back of the property.
And can you tell me when those were constructed, or when the rezoning was took place?
Certainly recently. It was within the last 5 years, might even have been within the last 3 years, but it was.
My curling club's right there. It's been in the last 3 years.
Mr. Miller, we can't hear you if you're trying to answer the question.
My apologies. Yes, the Google Street View for this showing them still under construction is in 2019, September, last dated.
Very recent.
And just one more, I guess a concern I have is when this development first came forward to the committee, I think back in 2015, the argument that was put forward at that time that 2 3-unit buildings was more desirable or appropriate, a better fit than a low-rise apartment building. And now we have this application coming back saying, please give us a low-rise apartment building in one of the 3-unit buildings. So I'm a bit concerned about that process, I guess.
I don't recall making that argument back in 2015. But clearly with the new official plan, there's significant emphasis and priority on accommodating additional units in the evolving neighborhoods and in close proximity to the traditional Main Street. So the new official plan clearly supports an additional unit in this location. And staff have no objection to the additional unit.
Anything further, Ms. McLean?
No, thank you.
Okay. Anyone else on the panel have any questions or comments for the applicant's agents? All right, Ms. Linker, if you wouldn't mind articulating the department's position, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Our comments remain the same as stated earlier, that we have concerns with the provision of parking being primary rather than secondary, as explicitly stated in the official plan and zoning bylaw, which is states that we should prioritize soft landscaping over parking during this conversion to introduce a low-rise apartment where a 3-unit already exists. And we believe that this does not meet the intent of the zoning bylaw or official plan.
Okay. And yet you've got a row of 4 low-rise apartment buildings with 2 parking spaces per unit directly north of the subject site.
I'm sorry, I don't believe I have any comment on that.
Yeah, well, that's what you've got. Okay. All right. Thank you, Ms. Linker. There are no objections from any of the agencies. I don't believe there are any speakers from the community association or immediate neighbors. Are we prepared to vote on this amended application? All right. All in favor of the application at 307 Picton Avenue to convert a triplex dwelling into a 4-unit low-rise apartment dwelling? And those are 1, 2, 3, 4. The 3 initial variances, and then 1, 2, 3, 4 extra variances and some amendments to one of the initial variances. Those are the amendments. All in favor of this application as provided to us. Application's approved. Good luck with your project.
Thank you very much.
We'll now deal with item 12 on the agenda. That is another one of the adjourned items from the 16th of November. This is in regards to 608 Tweedsmuir Avenue to permit reduced interior side yard setbacks, front-facing garages, and increased building height for the construction of a 2-story semi-detached dwelling. And I believe Ms. Hill is the applicant's agent. Ms. Hill.
Hello.
For the record, your address, please.
414 Churchill Avenue North.
Okay, so this is back before us after an adjournment. I'm assuming you were discussing this application with staff and with neighbors during the
Yes,
adjournment
we were.
period? Okay. All right, if you'd like to proceed briefly, please, Ms. Hill.
Okay, thank you.
You're very welcome.
So this is an image of the proposed development.
Oh, before we continue, hang on. For the last time this year, I'm going to ask you to you solemnly swear or affirm that the notice provided to you as part of the application process and by the committee was posted at the property to which the application applies for the prescribed number of days before the hearing and clearly visible and legible during the entirety of that time.
Yes, I do so swear.
Okay, please continue.
Okay, so this is the proposed STEMI. And we're proposing 3 variances. So side yard setback, garage, and or car location and building height. And I'm going to start by talking with you about the proposed reduction in side yard setback. So if I could have the next slide, please. Our site plan shows a typical semi. So I don't think I really need to walk you through the design features because you've all seen a semi. There's another semi in Westboro. You'll see there's a proposed 4 foot or just over 4 foot side yard, which is standard on all of the semis in Westboro. This part of Westboro, this little pocket of Westboro, was rezoned in Westboro neighborhood zoning exercise in order to allow for small apartment buildings. And in anticipation of those small apartment buildings, the side yard setback was set at 1.5 meters because it was assumed that garbage would be stored in rear yard sheds and that the garbage would need to move down side yards and would need 1.5 meters to move those trolleys. We are not, however, or my clients are not, however, able to build a small apartment building here because the business model isn't viable for them. I don't think for any developer on this site, given the all of the regulations that come to bear. So in terms of meeting the official plan goal for intensification on this site, this is the most intense and viable business model for this property. 4 dwelling units, 2 primary units in the upper floors, and 2 secondary units in the basement on each side. And so as we're proposing the typical semi, we would like to use the typical semi side yard. Many of the provisions that would apply to a semi were retained when that zoning was implemented, and this one seems to have been overlooked. So in the next slide, you'll see the lots in the neighborhood that have this same side yard. So red represents homes with less than a 1.2 side yard, and blue represents homes with that 1.2 meter side yard. So obviously it's very prevalent in the neighborhood, this kind of side yard setback. On this lot width, it's significant to our development. It's a 1 foot difference, but it's the difference between a garage in which you can actually open your car doors and one in which you cannot. Very conveniently, you've got to squeeze out. So I would propose that change is really very minimal. It's appropriate in the neighborhood because it's consistent to existing patterns, and it allows us to achieve this most significant amount of intensification that we possibly can, which would certainly be the intent of the official plan, in a way that's really contextually appropriate. So next slide, please. I'm going to speak to building height next. And you will have probably seen some of the email traffic around how we calculate building height. It's fundamentally complicated in our zoning. And that's why there was some confusion about how to calculate it. But we have now settled down on one interpretation. So next slide, please. The green line shows a building height or a building roof line that would be zoning compliant. We would like, as you see here, to go a little above that with our main peak, so just over a foot higher, and to add a gable on the back. When we do make those two relatively small changes, it significantly changes the way in which we calculate building height. So from the green line to the blue line. So next slide, please. This is a view from the backyard of that, the addition of that gable. And it's really, I don't think it has an impact on anyone. So it's a height variance that seems more significant than maybe it is. The difference inside is it allows for a small rec room on the top floor, which is great because they don't have their basement for a rec room. Next slide, please. So in the early days before our design development, next slide, please. We met with community members, immediate neighbors. We showed them this volume and we talked to them about garage location and the location of the car. Next slide, please. We showed them images of other garages around their neighborhood and different options for garages. Next slide, please. Including some garages. I'm getting close to the end. May I continue?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. The top left image, you see actually side by side on Tweedsmuir, and a new semi with garages in the front facade, and then beside it, a new semi with the overhang scenario that previous presenter was speaking to earlier today. So all of these options are present in their neighborhood, and people are very aware of these different options. So if you go to the next image, we talked to the neighbors about our desire for a more traditional roof line and how difficult it would be to design an appropriate looking cantilevered scenario for that parking space in a more traditional looking building. Those cantilever designs work well when you've got shifting volumes and you're designing with a more contemporary look. And what we wanted was a more contemporary look, particularly because we wanted to moderate the height of this building with its neighbors. So it happens to have two lower neighbors. The neighbor on the left is burnt out, so it will be replaced with a two-story building soonish. But still, we wanted to be sensitive, and by designing it with a more traditional roof line, we were able to bring the eave lower on the front and to have a design that just fits better with the street. And so neighbors seem to agree with us that it would be appropriate, more appropriate and more desirable to have the garage in this location as shown. I will stop there and maybe see if you guys have any questions. I could speak more to trees if you would like, or to the consultation process.
So in your opinion, the variances requested meet all four tests of the Planning Act?
Absolutely. As I said, the side yard setback, it's minor and it meets the intent of the official plan. And I think it's just kind of a quirk in the zoning. The garage, it also is minor, but it allows us to achieve the level of or the highest level of intensification that we can on this site, which is clearly the guiding principle in the official plan for these neighborhoods. And it does keep with the character of the neighborhood, and the neighbors told us that location for parking was desirable. In terms of building height, it is very minor. I know it doesn't look like minor. It's minor when you look at the pure numbers, but when you look at the actual difference in the building itself, it's if from the street it would be invisible to the naked eye, and from the back it's just that gable that's quite recessed. And so overall, it's a contextually very appropriate kind of solution. So yes, it's in keeping with the intent and of the regulations, and it's desirable. It's going to be lovely.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Ms. Hill. Ms. Linker, we understand that the department still has serious concerns regarding this application.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Staff have concerns with the proposed variance to permit a front-facing attached garage, as we are of the opinion that it deviates from the intent of the streetscape character analysis provisions. The streetscape character analysis is an objective count of elements on the site, and they are intended to encourage development to maintain the character of the existing homes on the street. The submitted SCA found that the dominant character of the street is no front-facing attached garage, and staff believes that the proposed front-facing attached garage deviates from the intent of the official plan and zoning bylaw in this respect. I'll also point out that the elevations show that the garages push the living space to the back of the house, which also results in a break in character on the street.
But the department is fine with the other two variances for side yard reduction and height increase?
That's correct, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Ms. Linker. There's a requested condition, Ms. Hill, that a development agreement or letter of undertaking for a tree planting plan and securities for a period of 1 year. You're aware of those?
Yeah.
Okay. How quickly can that be put in place?
It might depend on the city's legal department.
Okay. I think Ms. McLean had a question regarding this. Ms. McLean.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to planning staff or to forestry staff, should the committee impose this condition on a minor variance, just explain the process. Who would enforce that condition for an agreement?
I can try to speak to this. Through you, Mr. Chair, through discussion with city legal staff, it was highlighted that the Committee of Adjustment may impose such conditions to the approval as they deem reasonable, having regard for the nature of the development proposed. We can flag this condition internally so that zoning plans examiners and building code services know about the condition at building permit.
So just to be clear, because the committee's office would not be enforcing the condition after an appeal. If there was no appeal, they would issue the minor variance decision subject to this condition for an agreement. And you're saying the building code would look after, would ensure that the condition is met?
That's my understanding. Ms. Young, do you have a different understanding?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. My understanding is essentially we would make a note on the building code file and that they would come to Forestry to ensure that this condition is cleared at that time.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Ms. Hill, you had a further comment?
Oh, I was just, Ms. Young took the words out of my mouth. Absolutely, at building code, they enforce the work that's been done here.
Okay. All right.
Or building permit, sorry.
Okay. All right. Thank you for your presentation. I see that the neighbors are generally in support. You've resolved the issues regarding trees with the neighbors, I take it as well.
The issue with trees was more with forestry than with the neighbors. But the neighbors had identified a hydrangea bush that they valued, so we're certainly able to maintain that for them.
Yeah, and you're replacing the trees that are being removed with 10 replacements, I believe.
Yes, that's correct. So there was a bit of a lengthy conversation because, in fact, those are shared trees with our neighbor who will at some point redevelop. But there's no way to have that neighbor on the hook for the trees. So therefore, my clients are.
Okay, understood. And I note that that there are the majority of the neighbors who responded are in support of the application.
And the immediate neighbor who had wrote a letter 3 weeks ago expressing great concern. We did meet with her and her tenant, who is her aunt, and worked through lots of things. So I think we're in good shape with them.
Okay. All right. Are you prepared to vote on this application? Okay, so for the 608 Tweedsmuir Avenue, the minor variance applications for side yard setback height and front facing garages, which the planning department still opposes. All in favor of the application as presented with the condition for trees. Your application is approved. Good luck with your project.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. And we are going to take a 5-minute break and then proceed with the final applications on the agenda, which are items number 10 and 11, 432 and 436 Ravenhill. Back shortly. Back. Okay. Everybody's back? All right. All right. We will now deal with items 10 and 11 on the application list, 432 and 436 Ravenhill. This application was adjourned on the 2nd of November and is back before us today. Mr. Polton, I believe, is the agent for the applicant. Is he there?
Yes, I am.
All right, before we begin, Mr. Polton, do you solemnly swear or affirm that the notice provided to you as part of the application process and by the committee was posted at the property to which the application applies for the prescribed number of days before the hearing and clearly visible and legible during the entirety of that time?
Actually, the owners of the property are on the call and they will be making the oath. They were the ones who posted the signs.
All right, and where are they?
Park River Properties, Mr. Chair.
All right.
Hello.
All right, gentlemen. Let's go through this again. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the notice provided to you as part of the application process and by the committee was posted at the property to which the application applies for the prescribed number of days before the hearing and clearly visible and legible during the entirety of that time?
I swear.
All right. Good. Okay.
And sorry, Mr. Chair, who's taking the oath? What's the name of the?
Brian Ernst, 1690 Carling Avenue, Ottawa, Ontario.
Okay, this is an application to subdivide the property into 3 lots for the construction of 3 new detached dwellings with reduced lot widths, lot areas, rear yard setbacks and areas, reduced interior side yard and reduced rear yard landscape buffer, increased deck projection and building height. There have been changes since November. I believe we are now only with 3 consent applications and not 4.
Yes, that is.
Okay. So we've removed file D08-001-22/B00299 from the agenda. We've added in the lands to be retained paragraph that the applicant has revised the subject application to remove consent application, which I just noted, and the lands to be retained will have a frontage of 5.38 meters on Ravenhill Avenue to a depth of 24.49 meters and will contain a lot area of 136 square meters. This parcel contains 1/2 of the existing semi-detached dwelling and be known municipally as 436 Ravenhill Avenue. Part of Part 2, 5R-4055, also amending the approval of these application paragraphs. The approval of these applications will have the effect of creating 3 separate parcels of land. Proposed development will not be in conformity with the requirements of the zoning bylaw, and therefore the minor variance applications, and the 2 of them are listed, have been filed for 3 of the proposed dwellings and for the retained parcel and semi-detached dwelling, which will not be in conformity with the requirements of the zoning bylaw and will be heard concurrently with these applications. And also amending the proposed easement paragraph that is proposed to create an easement right away over Part 2 in favor of Parts 3 to 7 and 436 Ravenhill is added, and over Part 4 in favor of Parts 5, 6, and 7 and 436 Ravenhill Avenue is also added for pedestrian and vehicular access. So those are the changes that we're aware of. We have a question, however, regarding the lot width. It's on our submission or our paper. It's reading a reduced lot width of 5.5 meters, and yet we're also talking about 5.38 meters. So which is it? Is it 5.5 or 5.38?
I'd have to review plans, but my understanding is the frontage might be 5.38, but the lot width is 5.5. I'll just double check that right now.
Mr. Chair, maybe while Mr. Polton's checking that, I can just provide some very quick preliminary comments.
Please do, Mr. Chow.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'll start by saying we think this is a very exciting infill project for this corner property in the Westboro neighborhood. It has generated a great deal of discussion with both the city staff and with Ms. Bellinger on behalf of her client, who is the owner of the other half of the semi-detached dwelling. As a result, we have before you this afternoon a very complex application with numerous variances. Although I think the Novatech planners have done their best this afternoon to stay within your 5-minute time frame for presentations. With all due respect, Mr. Polton is going to fail miserably on that count on this file, and I hope that you'll be patient with him as he takes you through the variances and the tests associated with those variances, as he's required to do to give you the opportunity to properly consider the application. So I would ask you to please indulge him as he goes through the tests for the criteria for the severances and the tests for the variances. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chown.
So I do have confirmation. So the lot width is 5.5 meters. The retained parcel itself is 5.38 meters of frontage. So that's the difference there.
5.38 frontage, 5.5 width.
Yeah, so the variance speaks to the 5.5.
That's right. Okay. All right, Mr. Polton. You understand that the planning department is still opposed to this application?
I do understand, yes. Okay, so my name is Ryan Polton. I'm a planner at Novatech, and Novatech acted as the agent to prepare and file the consent and minor variance applications being heard today for 432 and 436 Ravenhill Avenue. Next slide, please. Okay, so this slide is an air photo of the property showing the block along Cole Avenue. And I would note it's in the middle of a low-rise residential community, predominantly developed with detached dwellings. Specifically along Cole Avenue, there are, and on the west side of Cole Avenue, all of the residential properties are detached dwellings that front onto Cole Avenue. So as explained at the start of this file, as initially filed, we thought the applications were for two properties that were all separate. We subsequently learned that the properties merged on title, and so that necessitated some revisions to the applications. The first application was no longer relevant. It was for a lot line adjustment. As a result of that, that application's been removed. As well, based on city staff's comments before the first hearing, there was concern about access to the existing semi-detached dwelling at 436 Ravenhill. So the easements were revised to include the beneficiary as 436 Ravenhill Avenue. And those are the easements over the shared driveway. These revisions do not change the requested lot fabric, proposed development, or the requested minor variances. Next slide, please. This is a zoning map of the property. And I would note the property is dual zoned. So the previous corner lot was zoned residential fourth density. The semi-detached dwelling at 436 Ravenhill is zoned residential third density. The difference there being that the fourth density zone, that's where the proposed detached dwellings are located, and it complicates development at a higher density than the R3 zone. It also permits low-rise apartment buildings. The R3 zone doesn't. And I would just note all of the residential properties along Cole Avenue that are interior lots are zoned R3. So more density is anticipated at this corner lot than the rest of Cole Avenue. Next slide, please. So this is a markup of the draft reference plan provided. It's highlighting all the different parts. So the three parcels are, the new corner lot will be parts 1 and 2. An interior lot will be parts 3 and 4. And the most southerly proposed lot will be parts 5, 6, and 7. There is an existing easement over an existing driveway, and that's all over parts 2, 4, and 6 on this draft reference plan. And this easement provides ingress and egress to the property at 438 Ravenhill. That's the western half of the semi-detached dwelling. And it's only for egress and ingress to the rear yard. No parking is permitted on this driveway. This easement cannot be removed without a court order or through agreement of all parties. So it is an existing condition developing the site. Next slide, please. This is the original reference plan registered for the semi-detached dwelling. So the retained lot is effectively for the semi-detached dwelling part 2 on this plan. The driveway that has the easement is part 3. Next slide, please. Okay, so we're into the consent sketches here. So this is the first consent sketch. It's severing the southernmost lot, that's parts 5, 6, and 7. I would note that this lot fabric fully conforms to the zoning bylaw. No variances are required to lot width or lot area for the southern lot. Next slide, please. So this application is for the middle lot. It's for parts 3 and 4. And you can see the easement requested over part 4, the middle part of the driveway. That's in favor of the property to the south. And now 436 Ravenhill Avenue. Next slide, please. And this is the final sketch. It severs the corner lot from the rest of the retained lands. It's parts 1 and 2. And part 2 easements are requested in favor of the 2 properties to the south, as well as Ravenhill Avenue. These easements are to access attached garages, as well as to access rear yards. Next slide, please. Oh, sorry. Going back 1 slide, please. Thank you very much. So I'll go into the consent rationale now portion for these applications. So the proposed severances and easements do not require a plan of subdivision for the proper and orderly development of the municipality. Then I need to speak to the criteria in section 51, subsection 24 of the Planning Act. So criterion A, the proposed severances and easements have regard for matters of provincial interest that's listed in my covering letter. Criterion B, the property is within a fully developed neighborhood with hard and soft services available. The severances and easements are not premature and are in the public interest. Criterion C is conformity with the official plan. So the subject property is designated general urban area in the 2003 official plan and neighborhood in the 2021 official plan. There are policies in both of these official plans that encourage residential infill and intensification in these designations. The proposed severances will complement the existing pattern of low-rise residential development along Ravenhill and Cole Avenue. The proposed detached dwellings are permitted uses in these designations. The easements are an innovative use of existing infrastructure. No new driveways are proposed off Cole Avenue or Ravenhill Avenue. As per section 6.3 of the 2021 official plan, the proposal represents context-sensitive development. And then also in the 2021 official plan, it speaks to permitted densities and neighborhood designations. And quote from the official plan, the zoning bylaw will distribute permitted densities in neighborhoods by B, allowing lower densities and predominantly ground-oriented dwelling forms further away from rapid transit stations, corridors, and major neighborhood amenities. Next slide, please. So this is just a quick slide, and it demonstrates there's the Dominion LRT station, and there's also Richmond Road, which is considered a coordinator. This shows effective walking distances from the subject property to these features. And to the LRT station, it's 610 meters. To Richmond Road, it's 185 meters. So the subject property is located away from these 2 features. The proposed residential density of development is appropriate for the subject property. The proposed severances and easements conform to the policies of both official plans. So on to criterion D, it has to do with the suitability of the land for the purposes for which to be subdivided. The property can accommodate residential infill development and intensification. Both official plans support this. The proposed parcels are suitable for development of residential purposes. Criterions D1 and E do not apply. Criterion F has to do with the dimension and shapes of the proposed lots. 2 of the proposed severed lots and the retained parcel require variances for performance standards for those lots. These variances are discussed in the later on when I talk about the minor variances. In our opinion, the dimension and shape of the proposed lots are suitable to accommodate the proposed detached dwellings and the existing semi-detached dwelling. Criterions G and H don't apply. Criterion J has to do with the adequacy of school sites. The proposed consent applications are not anticipated to have an impact on the adequacy of school sites. And criteria K has to do with the land that is to be conveyed for and dedicated for public purposes. The city staff have requested a corner site triangle. So that'll be as a condition of approval. And then finally, L and M don't apply. So that's all the criteria. And in our opinion, the requested severances and easements have regard for the criteria under the Planning Act. Very quickly, the decision also has to be consistent with the policies of the PPS. So the properties are in the settlement area of Ottawa. The severances and easements efficiently use land, and the subject property is serviced by existing infrastructure. There are many public service facilities in the area. The proposed development is considered intensification by definition in the PPS. And as per policy 1.4, the requested severances provide for an appropriate range and mix of housing options and densities. The consent applications are consistent with the PPS. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is the site plan submitted with the applications. I'll briefly cover this. So 3 detached dwellings are proposed that face Cole Avenue. There are 7 proposed trees that are in the front yards on private property along Cole Avenue. 3 are proposed in the public right of way along Ravenhill Avenue. I would note there are very generous landscaped boulevards between the edge of pavement and the actual property lines. They're 5.5 meters wide, and then the yards start. I would also note that the existing driveway is proposed to be used for attached garages for the 3 proposed detached dwellings. Next slide, please. This is the front and rear elevations for the 3 dwellings. I would just note the buildings has been designed to appear to be the same height from Cole Avenue. Next slide, please. This is the north elevation. So we're actually looking south, and we're looking at the 3rd dwelling, the southernmost dwelling. And you can see that is the attached garage that is at the end of the existing driveway. Next slide, please. This is also a north elevation. So again, we're looking south, but this is the proposed dwelling on lot A. This is the facade that will face Ravenhill Avenue. And you'll see the principal entrance is on Ravenhill, but by definition, the building itself, the front lot line is along Cole Avenue. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is the rationale for the minor variances. There are 20 of them in total across the 4 different parcels. And I've got to speak to 4 tests for all of them. Please interrupt me if I'm taking too long, and I will proceed past this. All of what I have to say and more is included in the covering letter I provided with the applications. But to start with then, these are the variances that are requested for the retained parcel. There are 6 of them, and they vary the proposed lot width, the proposed lot area, the ask for a reduced interior side yard setback, and then the last 3 have to do with the rear yard, a reduced rear yard setback, reduced rear yard area, and reduced rear yard softly landscaped buffer. So with those variances in mind, the first test is the intent and purpose of the official plan is maintained. So that some of this information I repeat for this will benefit the rest of the discussion for the separate parcels as well for variances. So the 2000 official plan designates the property general urban area. The intent of the general urban area is the development of a full range and choice of housing types. The 2021 official plan designates the property neighborhood, and the intent of the neighborhood designation is neighborhoods are planned for ongoing, gradual, integrated, sustainable, and context-sensitive development. Both official plans include policies that support and encourage infill development and intensification on the subject property. The requested variances for the retained parcel preserve the existing semi-detached dwelling and facilitate the other 3 severances. The requested variances maintain the intent and purpose of the official plans. The second test is the intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw. So in this case, the retained parcel is actually zoned R3, and this zone permits a mix of residential building forms ranging from detached to townhouse dwellings in areas designated general urban area in the official plan, and to regulate development in a manner that is compatible and existing land use patterns so that the mixed dwelling residential character of a neighborhood is maintained or enhanced. The R4 zone for the other severances have the same purposes, except they permit low-rise apartment buildings. So with those purposes for the zone identified, the existing semi-detached dwelling is a permitted use in the R3 zone. All of the requested variances relate to moving the old lot line that no longer exists because it's been merged to the location to the west of the existing driveway. There's no changes proposed to the semi-detached dwelling. The driveway will be maintained. It has to be maintained legally. The functionality of the semi-detached dwelling and driveway will be maintained. The variances will also maintain the character of the semi-detached dwelling and driveway along Ravenhill Avenue. So requested variances for the retained parcel support the severances to permit infill development and intensification. The requested variances maintain the intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw. Third test is, are they desirable for the use of the land? So no new development is proposed on the retained lands. No changes are proposed to the existing semi-detached dwelling. The driveway will be maintained. The owners of 438 Ravenhill will continue to be able to use the driveway for ingress and egress to their rear yard. The existing semi-detached dwelling is permitted in the designation as per the official plans, as well as in how it's zoned. The requested variances facilitate infill development on the severed lands the requested variances are desirable for the subject property. The last test is, are the variances minor? So for that, I have to speak to them individually. So variances A and C request reduced lot width and interior side yard setback. No changes are proposed to the building or the landscaping. An easement is proposed over the driveway to provide access to the rear yard for building maintenance. With that in mind, the requested variance will have no impact on the functionality of the property. Variance B requests to reduce lot area. So portions of the rear yard, including a detached garage and the driveway, will be severed from this retained parcel. No landscaping will be changed in the front yard, interior side yard, and the portion of the rear yard that's adjacent to the semi-detached dwelling that's north of the driveway. So 436 Ravenhill will have a fully landscaped front yard and access to the rear yard through the easement. And then variances D, E, and F all have to do with the rear yard. So they request rear yard setback, rear yard area, and softly landscaped buffer. Functionally, it's the same rear yard amenity area that's provided today. The driveway cannot be used as amenity space and segments the rear yard. No changes to the amenity area are proposed adjacent to the building. The requested variances are considered minor. So that's the 4 tests under the Planning Act for the retained parcel for the variances requested. Next slide, please. Okay, so there are 4 variances requested for the southernmost lot. They all relate to the design of the proposed building. The first one is for reduced interior side yard setback. I would point out it's to the northern interior side yard. It's not adjacent to the existing residential development to the south. The variances B, C, and D relate to reduced rear yard setback, rear yard area, and softly landscaped buffer. Next slide, please. So these are the variances for the middle lot. There are 5 variances requested. Variance E requests increased building height. It's the only one that requests building height. Variance F is for reduced minimum lot area. Variance G is for reduced interior side yard setbacks. Variance H is to permit a deck in the rear yard to project over the garage and on the second floor. And variance I is for reduced softly landscaped buffer. Next slide, please. Okay, and then these are the 5 variances for the northernmost lot, the new corner lot, and they're to reduce the permitted, they request a reduced minimum lot area to permit a reduced corner side yard setback, to permit a reduced interior side yard setback, to permit a deck, a similar deck is proposed in the rear yard, and then again to permit a reduced softly landscaped buffer. So the 4 tests for these variances collectively. So with regard to the first test, the intent and purpose of the official plan, all of the variances that are requested support intensification and infill development on the subject property. They're consistent with the direction from the official plan, and they enhance the residential character along Cole Avenue. Specifically, variance E for increased building height on lot B. It supports the detached dwelling to be the same height as the 2 other proposed dwellings that are fully conforming in terms of building height. Variances B and C are for a reduced rear yard setback and rear yard area for lot A. This is because there's a attached driveway proposed at the end of the existing, there is an attached garage proposed at the end of the existing driveway. It's roughly in the same spot as there is an existing detached garage today. And it's these are requested to take advantage of the driveway. These variances support the dwelling in terms of providing parking on lot A. Variances D, I, and N are for reduced softly landscape buffers for all 3 lots. This is a technical variance. This was introduced by the Westboro development overlay. And the intent of this is to provide like a landscape strip in the interior of residential lots. The zoning bylaw did not anticipate this situation where we'd be creating a rear yard condition along an existing driveway that can't be changed. So for these variances, they're technical. That driveway has to legally remain and is not considered soft landscaping. The variances use an innovative approach to provide parking to these detached dwellings without providing any new driveways along Cole Avenue or Ravenhill. It's efficient infill development. And then finally, variances H and M, they propose the second floor decks over into the rear yard. This is to provide extra private amenity area in the rear yards. It supports multifunctional use of the proposed rear yards. So the requested variances maintain the intent and purpose of the official plans. The second test is the intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw. So all of the requested variances for these three lots are consistent with the purposes of the R3 and R4 zone, both of them, with regard to the proposed residential uses and enhancing the residential character of the neighborhood. The proposed dwellings are permitted in the general urban area and in the R3 and R4 zones. Specifically, variances F and J for the reduced lot area for lots B and C. That development is consistent with the underlying R4UA zone. The Westboro development overlay increased the performance standards for detached dwellings. If that did not apply, then these would be fully conforming lots in terms of lot area. Variances B and C are for a reduced rear yard setback and rear yard area for lot A. Again, that's the attached garage to permit that as part of the detached dwelling on lot A. Variances D, I, and N are for reduced landscape buffer. These again are technical variances for the existing driveway and it's not considered soft landscaping. And they allow for fully landscaped front yards as because they provide an alternative parking arrangement. And then variances H and M for the second floor decks, they support additional private amenity area for the detached dwellings. All in support of detached dwellings that are permitted on the property. So the requested variances maintain the general intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw. The third test, I'll just take a second. The third test are the variances desirable for the use of the land? This is where we have to go individually. So the variances F and J are for reduced lot area for lots B and C. The property is designated and zoned to permit the detached dwellings. The property is in a corner lot in an established low-rise residential neighborhood suitable for intensification. The variances are desirable. Variance E is for building height for lot B. All three detached dwellings are designed to appear to be the same height. No variance is required for the dwellings. That variance is desirable. That variance K has to do with reduced corner side yard setbacks for lot C. There is a large landscape area in the right of way along Ravenhill Avenue. The existing side yard setback across the street at 451 Cole Avenue is 0.9 meters. We're proposing 1.5. The proposed variance is in character with the development along Ravenhill Avenue. This variance is desirable. Variances A, G, and L are for the reduced interior side yard setbacks. We've identified 9 properties along this block of Cole Avenue that have side yard setbacks less than 1.5 meters. That's the requirement of the zoning bylaw. We're providing a 1.5 meter interior side yard setback for lot A to the property to the south for the existing development. These variances are desirable. Variances B and C are for reduced rear yard setbacks and rear area for lot A. Again, that's for the attached garage. It also above the garage, there's private amenity space that's provided. They both support the detached dwelling and these variances are desirable. So all of the variances requested for the severed parcel and the proposed development are considered desirable for the subject property. The last test for these variances is that are they minor? So with regard to variances F and J, the reduced lot areas for B and C, the reduced lot areas will not be visible from the street. The proposed lots can be developed to accommodate the detached dwellings. No impact on the streetscape will result from approval of these variances. The requested variances are minor. For variance E, that's the increased building height. Again, it's requested so that all 3 buildings are the same height from the street. The property actually slopes down towards Ravenhill, and because of how building height is calculated, all 3 properties have their own point where they start to measure. That's why this variance is required. Granting this variance will create a consistent building height from the street. It's consistent with the character development along Cole Avenue, and that variance is minor. Variance K has to do with the corner side yard setback for lot C. Again, same argument, large landscape areas along Ravenhill. We're also proposing 3 new trees along Ravenhill. These will mitigate the existing landscaping and trees will mitigate any potential impact from this requested variance. It's a greater setback than the existing development along Ravenhill. These variances are minor. Variances A, G, and L are for the reduced interior side yard setbacks for lots A, B, and C. Don't think I've covered this already. So there are no proposed reductions. Yeah, I think I've covered that one. But there are no proposed reductions required to the interior side yard to lot A, to the property to the south. Generally, the purpose of the sides yards are for access to rear yards and for maintenance of the building. In this case, there's an existing driveway that provides access to the rear yards. These variances are minor. Variances B and C are for the reduced setback and rear yard for lot A. It's for the attached garage that's located at the end of the driveway. This design approach provides parking and amenity area behind the detached dwelling. The variances are not anticipated to have any impact on the suitability of the property or adjacent properties for residential purposes. These variances are minor. Variances D, I, and N are for the reduced landscaped buffer for lots A, B, and C. These variances are technical and reflect a condition not anticipated by the zoning, creating a rear yard condition against an interior side yard. The existing driveway cannot be changed to soft landscaping. No impacts are anticipated by retention of the driveway. The use of the existing driveway for parking provides an opportunity to fully landscape the front yard along Cole Avenue. These variances are minor. And then finally, variances H and M for the proposed decks in the rear yard of lots B and C. These decks provide additional amenity area. The decks look onto a blank wall with no windows. It's a blank brick wall is the sidewall condition for 346 Ravenhill. Approval of these variances are anticipated to have no negative impacts on 436 Ravenhill. That request is minor. So the requested variances are minor and meet the 4 tests under the Planning Act. I've got probably 2.5 more minutes left of this presentation. I will go quickly. So next slide, please. So this was just a quick slide that demonstrates the existing corner side yard setback at 451 Ravenhill. We would like to address some of the staff report, some of the comments in the staff report with regard to these applications. They're opposing it. They've have concerns with the applications with regard to maximizing the overall availability of green space and soil volumes on site and on the impacts to 436 Ravenhill Avenue. My understanding is that there's no requirement in the official plan or zoning bylaw to maximize the availability of green space and soil volumes on site for low-rise residential infill development. The city's staff have suggested the applicant consider what could be developed as of right, and which would have a lesser impact on the soft landscaping and the existing semi-detached dwelling. With regard to soil volumes, we are planting trees. 7 trees are proposed along Cole Avenue. 3 trees are proposed along Ravenhill. I think that's why I'm saying there's 2 trees along the private driveway as well. In terms of soft landscaping and impacts to 436 Ravenhill, can you go to the next slide, please? This is a markup of the site plan that's submitted. It highlights all of the soft landscape area on the severed lots as well as on the retained lot. It's 311 square meters. Next slide, please. This is a as of right development if the semi-detached dwelling was severed. So basically 2 properties have merged. We would file a severance application to reestablish 2 separate lots. The lot line would move, but it would provide a 1.5 meter side yard for 436 Ravenhill. So this would be a fully conforming lot. It would even extend all the way to the existing rear lot line. Following that severance, it would create a new corner lot. This is what could be developed on that corner lot as of right in terms of a low-rise 6-unit apartment building. It provides all the required yards. It maintains the existing driveway. Parking would be provided under the building, so there'd still be no driveways along either right-of-way. The building itself could be located closer to the property to the south at 1.2 meters. And as well, you will note that the soft landscape area on this sketch is under 300 square meters. So less soft landscape area is possible on the properties with more dwelling units to be located on the property. So in terms of the city's concerns, we we see this concept as having far greater impact on 436 Ravenhill Avenue and adjacent development than the 3 proposed detached dwellings that are in front of you today. I would point out as well, balconies would be permitted above the above the first floor on this building. The building itself could cantilever to be within 1.5 meters of the lot line. So it could be much closer to 436 Ravenhill than what's proposed today, which doesn't require rear yard setbacks for the 2 northern lots. Next slide, please. So the last slides I have are renderings of the proposed development. So this is a perspective drawing from Cole Avenue at grade. It shows the front of the 3 dwellings. Next slide, please. This is a aerial view looking down from the intersection of Ravenhill and Cole Avenue. Again, we're looking at the landscaped front yards as well as the front facades of the 3 buildings. Next slide, please. This is street view, how the buildings would appear in context along Cole Avenue. Next slide, please. This is the proposed driveway and garage doors for the first 2 units for lots A and B, B and C. So this shows the driveway and how it would be used to access garage doors. Next slide, please. So this is the second last slide. This is an air photo looking down at the driveway at the rear of the 3 buildings. And you see the 3rd garage with the amenity space above on the right-hand side. Next slide, please. Okay, so in conclusion, the proposed detached dwellings represent context-sensitive development, fit the residential character of the area and of the existing development along Ravenhill and Cole Avenue. It's appropriate for the development of the property. The consent applications meet the criteria in section 5124 of the Planning Act and are consistent with the policies of the PPS. The requested variances meet the 4 tests under the Planning Act. The consent and minor variance applications represent good land use planning. Thank you.
Thank you. That took a while, but you were very comprehensive. It's nice to have the explanation given. You're aware of the requested conditions, and I'll just read through them.
Okay.
Cash and lieu parkland, a tree planting plan, existing dwelling removed and services capped, independent services, accessory structure demolished or relocated, grading and drainage plan, 3.3 meter corner site triangles, development agreement for asphalt overlay, and a Juma.
Yes, we have concerns with how condition 9 is worded. If you go to the italicized paragraph, it says the joint use and maintenance and common elements agreement shall set forth the joint use and maintenance of all common elements, including but not limited to. Then it lists a bunch of stuff. None of that applies to the proposed development.
Well, that's something you're going to have to take up with planning staff.
Well, we were hoping to get the condition amended so that it wouldn't speak to party walls, sewer laterals, structural elements such as roofs, because none of those are shared between any of the properties.
Is the planner there? Ms. Laker? Comments on the Juma agreement? I'm sure you've had a discussion with the applicant's agents on this already.
Oh, we haven't been able to bring up this specific concern with condition 9 with city staff. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Staff would be comfortable removing what doesn't apply in the condition.
Is that sufficient?
I thank staff for that. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you for sure. I think that is sufficient.
Okay, so that'll be modified to needs. Okay. All right.
And we would request that all of the variances, we understand the practice of the Committee of Adjustment to tie the variances to the plans filed. We would just request to make sure that tying the variances to plans as they relate to the variances requested. So that other elements could vary from those plans that we're not requesting permission for.
Okay, we'll consider that.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I just wondered if I could ask on the conditions to planning whether they considered a rezoning since the new development would be dual zone?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
I just wondered, had you given any thought to asking for rezoning since the new development would be dual zoned?
Through you, Mr. Chair, there would be no need for rezoning. This can be taken care of through the minor variance process.
Okay, thank you.
All right, as the applicant understands, the planning department still opposes this application. So Ms. Linker, please articulate the department's position.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Staff opposed the application because it is our belief that it does not meet the 4 tests of a minor variance. When considering the site context and the proposed lot size and configuration, staff are of the opinion that the cumulative impact of the variances to accommodate the proposed development will result in an insufficient amount of available on-site soft landscaping, which does not meet the general intent of the zoning bylaw or official plan. In addition, the proposed severance comes at the cost of the rear yard and associated outdoor amenity area for the existing semi-detached dwelling at 436 Ravenhill Avenue. Therefore, staff do not believe the proposed development is appropriate for the property and is not minor in terms of the cumulative effect of the proposed variances. We consulted with staff who wrote the Westboro overlay provisions, and they share our opinion that the proposed variances do not maintain the intent of the zoning bylaw and agree with this opposition provision.
Thank you, Ms. Linker. We have a number of other presenters, I believe. Ms. Bellinger, are you there? Can't hear you.
I am. Thank you.
All right. For the record, your address, please.
Suite 350 O'Connor Street, Ottawa.
All right. All right, Ms. Bellinger, for regarding this application, your comments on behalf of the of your client, please.
Yes, I'm representing, as stated in the previous appearance, Ms. Klassen, who lives at 438. The other half is the double that was previously severed. So the other half is 436. Previously, the driveway that we're talking about, the private driveway, was part of 436. The most important thing, I think, before you now is that we're dealing with a single lot. Those two titles merged, whether it was intended or not, they are merged, and the applicant's not seeking to unmerge them. So we are dealing with 3 new dwellings proposed on a single lot that will be severed. And we're dealing with a 4th dwelling on the remainder of that single lot. So 4 dwellings on what is presently 1 existing lot, straddling 2 zones. The zoning bylaw contains specific provisions. I've outlined them in my written submissions dealing with planned unit development. I know the applicant and their planners disagree with me on this point, but I, on a plain reading of planned unit development and experience in undertaking planned unit developments, this looks very much like a planned unit development. And in my opinion, it fits clearly within the definition of a planned unit development, which means 2 or more residential use buildings on the same lot with certain specified exceptions. Mr. Chown has suggested to me that, oh, but this is not 1 lot. This is going to be 4. It'll be the 3 new lots plus the 1. Therefore, it's not a PUD. But if you read the planned unit development provisions in section 131 of the bylaw, those provisions anticipate that you start with 1 lot, you have your 3, 4, whatever number of residential buildings you're proposing, and you may or may not choose to sever those as part of your PUD development proposal. The significant difference between doing a PUD and doing an application to the committee to create new lots that don't comply, any of them, none of them comply completely with the bylaw, and the difference is a planned unit development is subject to site plan approval. So all these studies and conditions that are going to be done that we're worried, how does building department then enforce these, would be dealt with in the ordinary course in a site plan agreement and would probably be properly addressed. The other significant difference with a PUD is there has to be a significant buffered setback between the private driveway and the facade of the adjacent dwellings. So it's my opinion that it is a PUD. When there's difference of opinion, the bylaw also deals with that in section 18, general provisions. It says where a situation arises that is not covered by a specific regulation, or where two or more regulations, so in this case, the R3, R4 provisions that the applicant's applying are equally applicable. So the R3, R4 and the PUD provisions, based on a plain reading of the definition of PUD, are equally applicable. Then it says, when that happens, all provisions must be complied with, or where it's not possible to comply with all the provisions applicable, the most restrictive provisions shall be complied with. So based on that, and based on the variances which have been very capably outlined and summarized in the applicant's submissions, both written and today, we would agree that a plan of subdivision is not required for this development, but we would take the position that the variances sought, particularly in the case of rear yard buffering, are neither technical nor minor, and I'm not sure what is gained by characterizing them as technical variances. Those buffer zones in the rear yard are specifically contemplated by the Westboro overlay and incorporated into the zoning bylaw, and they're there to protect the adjacent owners, and that protection becomes more important when you take what was a corner lot with side yards abutting the driveway and you're turning them all forward towards Cole. We agree Cole looks wonderful along the front, but the back has a complete disregard for the requirements of the zoning bylaw, and in particular the buffering. And on that basis, we would say it's not consistent with the intent or the requirements of the bylaw, and it is not minor, both in the extent of the variances that I believe sought from 4.2 down to 0.2 or something like that with the landscape buffering. There's significant variances. Both 436 and 438 look out into that rear yard area. 436 looking on to what used to be 438 will now be filled with in the rear portion of it by the building to be constructed on Lot A. Just a few comments as well regarding the stormwater concerns raised by the city. We share that. There's been no stormwater study, and there's minimal soft landscaping to absorb the runoff off the back of the houses. There are just a second comments from the tree people that there should be three large growing trees planted in the tiny areas between the homes immediately adjacent to the private driveway. I'm not sure that's practical or what that will do to the private driveway over time. Again, something that would get a little more closely studied under site plan approvals. And the notation that the driveway is functional. My client has some civil issues with this that are not your purview, and she'll pursue those separately. But for historical use of the double, the owners always juggled parking in the driveway. There was never any attempt to get to the rear yard of 436 to park, because the driveway is practically not functional back there. So that's the historical use. Whether or not that establishes a civil remedy, prescriptive rights, is not for any decision today. But to think that it would be represented to you that that's a functional driveway for these three new dwellings, it's simply not. It's not functional for my client. She may be stuck with it, may not be. It's certainly not going to be functional for the new owners. And the difference in width between the width of the shared private drive that would be required for a PUD and the width of a shared private drive that would be required, that is being offered here because it already exists as part of the original 436 now in the merged lot. It's just not something that's been studied. It's not a statement that I think should be relied on. It is not a functional private driveway.
Thank you, Ms. Bellinger.
Thank you.
All right. And we have Ms. Klassen on the list as well. I don't know if she wishes to speak.
Sure.
All right.
Sure, why not? First of all, yeah, just to mention a few things that have come up for me today. The first is you all deserve an award if you sit through these things often, and coffee. And I wish I could bring that to everyone here, including, everyone who sat through this. So thank you for doing this work, because I don't think it's easy, especially on Zoom. The second thing that's come up for me is, again, I've heard repeatedly minor in nature today, sitting through this. And, you know, those things were for basements and garages and garbage removal and a semi with 3 variances. And I understand I am not a planner. I am not a lawyer. I am a homeowner. That's what I am. This does not appear to me to be minor in nature. The streetscape, which, if the intention of a streetscape analysis is to maintain the existing character of the street, I would argue that every single, well, not every single, there is 1 or 2 that are fairly new on Cole that have access to back parking. But other than that, most of the parking along that street is in fact in the front. However, again, I just wanted to point that out. I would like to say too that a couple things that haven't yet been brought up. One is that there is currently a hedge surrounding 436 and 438 completely on all 3 sides. This provides security, privacy, and frankly, oxygen to everyone who's living here. This proposal would in effect create a concrete back alley out of something that is currently a private drive. And the negotiation is hard enough with 2 people sharing a drive. I don't have a clue how that looks with 5 people. And if I'm correct, I've heard that a single family residential unit could be, in theory, turned into a triplex without much work. Then that becomes, I don't know how many more people. So how that works, I don't know. It's been mentioned that the brick wall, which doesn't have windows, and it's very sad that it doesn't have windows, there would be balconies facing a brick wall. There is a window, you can't see it from the road, and there's a door as well. So both of those things would be impacted by balconies and cars and people coming and going. The biggest concern probably for me is the back. There are 2 and 436 and 438, both of them, their back addition has a massive glass wall, basically sliding door. And those would effectively, there would be no privacy, particularly for 436. But that would be reduced obviously by additional people and people walking up and down the stairs. And there are also upper windows there as well, which would be impacted. There's a utility pole at the back of the property. I don't know if will be impacted by this building. There are sewers and drainage and garbage removal and snow removal. These are things that I don't know how that would work. So hopefully, if this gets accepted, those would have some kind of clear negotiation as to how that all works. But I think I perhaps have said my piece. There were a few slides that were a bit confusing to me. There was one slide with a gray box on the back of my property. I don't know what that is. I don't know where that slide came from, but there's no gray box. If that is implying a garage is there, there isn't a garage there. I don't know that there. But anyway, I don't know where that came from, but maybe I misunderstood that. And the last thing I had to say was, I think, Ryan, you mentioned that there would be no changes to the side yard on 436. but it looked like there was some green buffering soft landscape. So I don't know if those things are consistent or if that's changed, but that was mentioned today. I believe those are my big concerns, and I acknowledge that most of mine are civil and not the purview of this committee. I do not believe these are minor variances, and I hope that you will consider opposing this.
Your access to your parking is in the rear of the property, correct?
I'm sorry?
Your access to parking is at the rear of the property?
What do you mean by access?
Well, how do you get to your parking space? You drive to the rear of your property?
From the front to the rear, yes.
Okay, down the existing driveway that's there now.
Correct.
And as far as you're concerned with the changes, this is no longer going to be a functional driveway.
With the changes, it will not be functional. The way that is correct.
And how will it not be functional?
Because access to the back via what is outlined on the survey is very challenging. So for me to go there, I do not follow what is on the survey.
Challenging in respect of what they're going to
turning, size of vehicle, how to get in and out, to back in. Plus, for many years, we've negotiated with 436 how that would be used. So I've had access to parking on the lane and haven't needed to park in the back. So how would it be difficult if you look at the survey? We probably all have copies of the survey. It's pretty difficult to maneuver that parking space.
So if you had to park in the rear, you'd have to be driving in and backing out. There's no way you can turn around.
But yes, my access is from Ravenhill. No, not without, I mean, I don't know. I don't know if the planner could come and say you could re-landscape your entire backyard so that you can turn on it, unless they're providing me room to turn on their property on 436. But at this point, unless which I can do right now because I can, but you know, when there's going to be an obstruction there, I will not be able to do that.
I would imagine.
But yes, you can back in the lane. You can back very carefully into the spot, and then you can pull out front, or you could do the opposite.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, thank you for your input. It's definitely appreciated.
Thank you.
Good luck with your civil matters. All right, gentlemen, you've heard Ms. Bellinger, you've heard from Ms. Klassen, you've heard from the city. And the panel would like to hear from you, your comments regarding their input. Whoever wants to take it.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, are you addressing our group, the applicants group?
Yep. So, Mr. Chown, I guess.
So thank you, Mr. Chairman. If necessary, our clients are in attendance and can certainly answer questions, as is their legal counsel. Mr. Chair, let me start where you left off with Ms. Klassen. What's important to understand, and I think it's obvious from the applications, is that the applications before you in no way change the configuration or the functionality of the access to her rear yard. The easement is there today. The easement will be there tomorrow. The easement will be there in perpetuity, as Mr. Poulton indicated, unless there's an agreement between the landowners to abandon the easement or if there's some court order. So the application before you in no way affects her ability to access her rear yard as that right exists today. In fact, as a result of this development, our clients will be improving that condition by changing it from whatever condition it's in today into a more accessible and easily maintained driveway for the benefit of all of the landowners. I'll go back and I'll quickly just want to touch base on a few comments made by Ms. Linker and my good friend, Ms. Bellinger. Staff have consistently been raising concerns about the amount of soft landscaping that this development will provide. Mr. Poulton has demonstrated to you that the amount of soft landscaping proposed by this development is more than would be provided by an as-of-right development. Ms. Linker also talks about the impact on the rear yard of the semi at 436 Ravenhill. Firstly, I'm not sure that the city needs to worry about the impact on that property. That property is owned by our client. If our client had concerns about the impact on that property, we wouldn't be here today. They, as owners of that property, clearly have no issues with the impact on that home. But secondly, the functional amenity area for that property is defined by the easement. And so that everything north of the easement that provides amenity space for that unit today will be maintained in perpetuity if this project goes forward. For Ms. Bellinger, I continue to be dumbfounded, and I'm using that word deliberately, by her suggestion that this project is a planned unit development. If that was true, or if that argument was valid, then every single time this committee severs a property to allow for 2 detached dwellings, they would be creating a planned unit development, and that proposal would be subject to site plan approval. That's profoundly incorrect. That is not the way the city deals with severance applications before this committee. The city does not look at those conditions as being planned unit developments, because after the severance, we're going to get building permits for detached dwellings on each of those 2 lots, or in this case, we're going to, after the severances, we will be making applications for building permits for the detached dwellings on each of the 3 new lots. Her argument would have to apply for every single severance application before you to create lots for detached dwellings. And that simply is wrong. And I hope that city staff would back me up on that position. Lastly, I want to be clear about the suggestion or the position that we're taking that the variances with respect to soft landscaping are technical in nature. They're technical in nature because it is impossible for us to meet that requirement because of the existence of the driveway. The requirement for the soft landscaping is that it be located along the rear lot line. The existing driveway, which we all have to work with, is located along the proposed rear lot line, and we simply can't landscaping it. And that's why we characterize those variances as being technical in nature, because it is impossible for a development to provide any soft landscaping along the rear lot line because of the existence of the driveway. Mr. Chair, members, those are the submissions I would make in response to the comments. If you'll allow me, I don't know whether the applicant or our clients or whether Mr. Lemay want to add anything, and I caution all of you without trying the committee's patience.
Thank you, Mr. Chown. Any questions, comments from the committee? Mr. Wildman, please proceed.
Thank you, Chair. And just because how dumbfounded Mr. Chown was about what Ms. Bellinger said, I would like to give her the opportunity to retort, because I could see her shaking her head, and that says to me that she would like to say something, and I think it would be appropriate to hear from her. And if Ms. Bellinger's comments are sufficient, that's great. If there's any gaps in that, I might ask staff to just fill in any comments that they may have as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that opportunity. Through the chair, I'll respond to Mr. Wildman's question. I'm not suggesting that every time someone comes forward with a large lot and wants to put two new singles on it, that they wouldn't be able to comply or have variances. What Section 18 says is if both would apply, then you follow the more restrictive I think when you look at section 131 and the PUD provisions, all the R4 provisions, all the R3 provisions would be lifted if you're under a PUD, because you're going through an intensive planning process with the city planning office. But there are setbacks from private roads when a PUD involves a private driveway. And so that is the more restrictive provision that would be applied. In most cases that would come before the committee, and we've done some through our office, where you're taking a large lot and dividing it in two, either during or before construction, to create new legal conforming lots, perhaps with some minor, truly minor variances, you wouldn't get into the inconsistency between section 131 and the R4 provisions. But here we've got two provisions that on their face equally apply with the wording, notwithstanding the city didn't raise it in consultations with Mr. Chown. He asked me if that surprised me. It doesn't surprise me. It's often the case that we're raising new ways of doing things based on the existing wording of existing documents passed by the city in the form of a bylaw. So my interpretation that section 131 and the R4 provisions and R3 provisions both apply here, and the more restrictive have to be followed, would say that you need site plan review, you need a buffer between the private road and the dwellings of 5.2 meters, and you treat it as one big lot for zoning, and then you still get your severances, maybe by part lot control rather than coming back here. But that's my view. I think section 18 is rendered meaningless based on Mr. Chown's argument, with all due respect to him. And with respect to the condition relating to this driveway and the amendment to the Juma condition, make no mistake, there is that shared element if this gets approved, and it will be totally dysfunctional with that driveway owned in 3 separate titles by A, B, and C, if there isn't a Juma that requires those 3 owners to work out how they're maintaining and repairing. Because right now, my client is not responsible for any maintenance or any repair of that driveway.
Mr. Chair, I want to be clear, we're not objecting to the Juma in any way, shape, or form. We just want it to be related to the driveway and not structural elements as highlighted by Mr. Polton. We have absolutely no objection to the requirement for a Juma.
Thank you.
Sorry. And I would appreciate if staff could weigh in on the debate that we're having about a planned unit development. Thank you.
Yeah, if you don't mind, Mr. Chown, I'd like to carry on with my questions, and that happened to be one of them. Has staff turned their minds to the PUD issue? Have you consulted with anyone internally about that, whether from policy or from your legal services department? Where do you land on that in terms of what you've heard from both parties? I'm looking for a staff answer here.
Great, thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, staff are of the opinion that this would not be a PUD development, that this would be 3 single detached dwellings.
Yeah, I acknowledge that. I guess what I'm asking you though is, where do you land on what you heard from Ms. Bellinger and with regard to her comments?
With regard to her comments of whether or not this is a PUD, sorry, can you clarify your question?
Well, she made some pretty direct comments about the application of city policy. And she was quite clear that it not necessarily need to apply in every instance, but that it could apply. And I guess that's what we're looking for some feedback on from staff. Is she right, in your opinion, or is she missing it?
Sorry, I'll defer to my colleague, JC Renaud.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Jean-Charles Renaud, the senior planner for the Central Group. I just want to direct your attention to the definition of a PUD that I have right here, which is, it means 2 or more residential buildings that are on the same lot. So I think it establishes a clear definition, seeing as these 3 proposed units would be all on separate lots. Mind you, this is the first time this afternoon that I hear that this is an issue. So I will be blunt or honest in telling you that I have not consulted with anybody else on this prior.
Okay, so I don't think I got an answer, but I tried, and I appreciate everybody's attempt at trying to give me their opinion. I yield back to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Ms. Bellinger, briefly. Can't hear you.
The question focuses on when you're talking about more than one residential building per lot, is it before or after the severance, right? My friends are saying, oh, well, if you're incorporating a severance into your PUD application, then it's afterwards. But the PUD provisions in section 131 describes how the zoning works, and you take the entire lot and you apply the provisions in section 31. However, development parcels within the planned unit development, i.e. the severed, whether severed or not. So a planned unit development already contemplates, you've got one lot, you're proposing, and make no mistake, what we have before us today is not just a severance, it's a development proposal. And you're proposing 4 separate buildings on what is one single merged lot. And whether or not you later sever those, if the vehicular access off the private way, if the only access you're giving those 4 buildings or 3 buildings is off the private way, then it must comply with section 131. And I don't think any of this debate is needed, because section 18 steps in and says where you've got conflicting regulations and 2 could apply, the more restrictive apply, and 131 is the more restrictive. So I think section 18 is specifically there to help us with this very rare situation. And so I don't think this business of, well, they're going to be severed, so treat it as one building on each of 4 non-conforming lots. Right now, you have a development proposal before you for a single lot that will ultimately result in it being divided in 4.
Mr. Chair, may I be allowed a final comment?
Certainly, Mr. Chown.
Appreciate that very much. 2 things. One is both Mr. Renault and Ms. Linker have told you that this project does not meet the definition of a planned unit development. I would suggest that you rely on their opinion. You don't have to accept my opinion. You don't have to accept Mr. Polton's opinion, but I think you should be able to rely on the opinion that's been provided to you by both Mr. Renault and Ms. Linker. And secondly, Ms. Bellinger can't have her cake and eat it too. Either her position applies to every severance where you're allowing 2 detached dwellings as a result of the severance, which would result in more than 1 residential building on a property. Either it applies to everything or it applies to nothing. There's nothing in the bylaw that allows the city or anybody else to pick and choose. And as a result of that, it's not a question as to whether there's a more restrictive provision that applies or not, because the PUD provisions simply do not apply. And let me leave that with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chown. Any further comments from the members of the panel? I think with that, ladies and gentlemen, we will conclude the.
Mr. Chair, sorry, I had my hand up there, Mr. Chair.
Oh, sorry, Ms. Bookshire, please.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify something. I wasn't 100% clear on the parking situation at the back of Unit 438. I was wondering if Ms. Klassen could just clarify what she had said about what I understood is that you don't park behind your own half of the semi and that you use the laneway and you park on the other side of the semis at the rear there. Could you clarify exactly what
Yes, I can. Thanks for the question. So I do not park, where am I looking? Right, I'm going to look there. I do not park at the back of the other side of the semi by 436 in the garage, because half of that garage has been taken down. So I park either in the lane or in the front. And now when I found out that parking was going to be disallowed in the lane many, many, many months ago, I've put my parking on my backyard. So yes, I can get the car into there. It's very tricky. And I've been able to plunk a truck anytime I want. We've jostled cars in the lane with 436 and 438. We've worked it out for over 20 years to use that in interesting ways that, yes, have included parking. So I haven't had to figure out how am I going to get a car onto my lot because I could sit there with a truck anytime I was doing work. A truck would be there and we'd be hauling stuff over. And so I understand that's going to change. They want this to change, and perhaps that is what is going to happen. I believe it will require a significant amount of figuring out how to make that happen, because it is not easy right now. I'm not sure, did I answer that question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. All right. Well, as I was saying, sorry, Miss Oakshire, I didn't mean to I just wasn't trying to ignore you. Mr. Renault?
I want to allow myself to speak before you wrap things up. And this is just relating to the Juma discussion prior, so I apologize if this is out of order. But I want to make sure that the Juma condition remains just by removing some of the elements that are not appropriate for this development. And I want to make sure that I'm understanding correctly.
Yeah, that's what we agreed on.
Okay, excellent. Thank you.
All right. So with that, what we will do is we will reserve on this application, and you will receive our written decision in the mail in 10 days. Thanks very much, folks.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Compliments of the season to everybody.
Likewise to you and all your
healthy new year. Pardon me?
Likewise to you and your colleagues. We'll see you in the new year, because it's going to take a while for the new council to reconstitute the committee. So I'm sure we'll see you in the new year.
It's taken a while for the new council to digest Bill 23.
That too.
Yeah. All right. We are now going to